events team get nervous. Will come here and up there.
Yep.
If for some reason it doesn't click,
Yep.
just I can control it from up there as
Okay.
well. It should be all working.
So a point always good to make sure that you can get the attention of the audience any way you can. If it's by making very large farty noises, guaranteed, I will do it for you. I firstly want to welcome everyone who's here today and in the room with us, who braved the wild elements to come and be with us for this final culmination of our fantastic week-long educational festival and Festival of Education at UNSW. I'm very grateful that you are here with us, and a very warm welcome. But I equally want to extend a very warm welcome to our colleagues who are joining us online, and it's lovely to know that you can be here with us virtually as we start to come back together again. If you are wanting to join us online, don't forget you can do it via the Teams Live channel, or you can also do it on the socialising platform GatherTown if you'd like to join us there. The very first order of events is one that I'm so very pleased that we have the opportunity to do, and that is that we're going to have Dr. Peter Mackenzie do a welcome to country for us. Dr. Mackenzie, who's going to come and join me now, is an Aboriginal man who was born in the historic Aboriginal community of La Perouse. He is also an alumnus of UNSW, and he has also taught as a lecturer for UNSW. So it is so fitting that he has agreed to be with us today to welcome us to country for our educational festival. Thank you very much, Dr. Mackenzie.
Thank you. Well, what can I say on this horrible day? Well, what I can say is good morning, ladies and gentlemen, at the launch of this week-long UNSW Education Festival. My name is Dr. Peter Mackenzie, and I am a descendant and elder from the La Perouse Aboriginal community, which is situated on the shores of Botany Bay, right here in our Randwick City local government area. Pardon me. On behalf of the current La Perouse elders and community, I most warmly welcome you here today to our country on which this university stands. The welcome to country is our contemporary interpretation of receiving visitors who wish to visit areas within our traditional lands, or as we call it, country. It is a ceremony recognising our cultural and spiritual connection to country. This ceremony also gives us the opportunity to pay respect and to especially acknowledge our elders, past and present, and to reflect on our shared history and build a vision for a prosperous, healthy, and reconciled future. Our people have endured through vast changes to our landscape, to our livelihoods, and to our lifestyles. However, through the local Aboriginal Land Council networks, we are striving to deliver economic, cultural, and most importantly, educational security through institutions like the University of New South Wales and others, while maintaining ongoing spiritual relationships to our country. Again, we welcome you on behalf of the La Perouse Local Aboriginal Land Council, myself and the traditional custodians, and today we wish you a safe passage back to your homes, secure in the knowledge we hope that you feel that you are made very welcome in our traditional country. Thank you. I'm Dr. Peter Mack, and you're in a great institution here at UNSW today. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. That was wonderful.
No worries.
Thank you so very, very much, Dr. Mack, for that wonderful welcome to country. It means a great deal to us to start our educational event with those wonderful warm words from you. I thank you. As you all know, this is the first time ever we've had a Festival of Education at UNSW. It's a way that we have brought together our community across the institution to make the week-long event happen. It's a significant step. It's recognising, strengthening the ties within the various education communities at UNSW. And from all I have seen, it has been a fantastic week so far, full of generous sharing of great practice, reflections, inspiration across faculties, divisions, and career pathways. So the culmination this afternoon, we're going to have a wonderful keynote presentation, we're going to have a debate, and we're going to celebrate our colleagues who have done so much towards the education of our students through this very challenging time of the pandemic. And I must admit, I cannot believe how wonderful it is to see so many of you here today in person. It does really warm the heart. It is fantastic. Our Vice-Chancellor wanted to be here with us today and had said that he would do his best to do so. However, he actually has removalists at his house, packing up the furniture, and he thought perhaps it wouldn't be the right thing to leave home whilst that was going on. His wife would not be too happy. So instead, he has made a movie because he really wanted to join us, and he made a special point of preparing this movie to share with us.
Hello colleagues, and thank you Louise. Thank you Uncle Peter Mackenzie for your warm welcome to country. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from which we each gather, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today. I'm delighted to provide this message of support and congratulations for our Education Festival. It's wonderful to see colleagues from right across UNSW come together to celebrate education and its importance in our vision of improving lives across the globe. That this week's event is called a Festival of Education is entirely fitting. The past couple of years have been extraordinarily challenging. Yet what you have accomplished is more extraordinary still. The pandemic has highlighted the dedication and expertise of our university's educators and support staff. And my admiration for our educators has grown as you stepped up, innovated and adapted to very fundamental changes and almost overnight. What will always be a standout for me of this unique time is your singular focus on offering our students the very best possible education at every turn. And this focus has borne fruit. Our My Experience scores continue to improve. The results for T2 this year show our highest ever undergraduate satisfaction with teaching for the third term in a row. 86% of undergraduate students rated their teaching positively. That's a remarkable result given all that our students and of course our teachers have been through. And our graduate outcomes are another highlight. Our outcomes for full-time employment and median salary are considerably ahead of the national and Group of 8 averages. That our graduates are sought after and rewarded well is a great indicator of the value of a UNSW education. This Education Festival is a wonderful opportunity to celebrate and reflect on all that you've achieved. The themes woven into this week's events reflect the impact of the pandemic, but they also look to the wonderful opportunities we have for the future of educational practice, to inspire, challenge, celebrate. What a perfect trio. Over the past few months, as my time at UNSW draws to a close, I've reflected on the power and the potential of education. In our collective vision, transformative education is not only about those whom we teach, but those whose lives are transformed by our students as they go out into the world. As educators, this puts a tremendous amount of power in our hands. It's both an opportunity and a privilege. And in my 7 years at UNSW, I've seen that you are more than fit for that task. Our students are fortunate to benefit from your experience and your mentorship. This afternoon, some of our best will receive this year's awards for teaching and research supervision. These are great honours, that recognise commitment to excellence, and I offer my warmest congratulations to all the award recipients. To everyone who has brought this education festival together, a big thank you. To all the faculties for collaborating so generously, to all the hosts and guest speakers, to our educators for sharing their insights and experience, and to the PVC ESE team for coordinating all of those moving parts. Thank you everyone for your excellent work this year. Thank you for continuing to inspire, to challenge, and to celebrate the incredible gift that is education. It is now my pleasure to hand you back to our wonderful Director of Education, Professor Louise Lutz-Mann, to introduce today's keynote speaker.
I just realised that our Vice-Chancellor did what I didn't. He actually introduced me, so I was told by the team, get going. I'm like, right, we're into the program. Oh, by the way, I'm Louise. So my apologies. Yeah, thank you. I see so many friendly faces here. It's wonderful. I do want to add my thanks to those of the Vice-Chancellor, though. I cannot believe what everyone has achieved this year and last year in supporting our students doing their learning and teaching through the pandemic. We truly are a remarkable community for all that we do in that way. And I think we do continue to inspire, to challenge, and to celebrate education and our students. And I'll make a quick reference to the fact that this is encompassed in the Pro-Vice-Chancellor's new Education and Student Experience Strategy. If you have a chance, please do have a look at it. It is now my very fortunate job to introduce our keynote speaker. Professor David Bowd is highly regarded as an expert in the field of assessment and feedback. Indeed, many of the presentations we've heard this week have referred to Professor Bowd's excellent and relevant publications, and he is now the most highly cited researcher in higher education in Australia, which is a wonderful achievement. He is also the Alfred Deakin Professor and Foundation Director of the Centre for Research in Assessment and Digital Learning at Deakin University. He is an Emeritus Professor at the University of Technology, Sydney. He has held positions as a Head of School, Associate Dean and Dean of the University Graduate School at UTS, and indeed the Director of the Professional Development Centre at UNSW. So he's coming back. He's published extensively on teaching, learning and assessment in higher and professional education. His current work focuses on the areas of assessment for learning, academic formation and workplace learning, very relevant as you know. He's one of the most highly cited scholars internationally in the field of higher education with an H index of 94. Very impressive, yes. He has been a pioneer in developing learning-centred approaches to assessment across the disciplines, particularly in building assessment skills for long-term learning, designing new approaches to feedback, and perhaps most relevant recently, the implications of the pivotal to digital on assessment. The topic of his presentation is Rethinking Feedback for Learning, a challenge for course design, which as you may think is very relevant and topical given the last 2 years that we have had. Just want to let you know that we'll be having a Q&A session at the end of David's presentation. So we'll be taking questions from the floor. For those of you online, post your questions in Teams live. Just use the Q&A feed, upvote the questions you would like answered. If you're watching alongside others in Gathertown, please post your questions in Gathertown chat and they'll be transferred to the Q&A feed. So without further ado, Professor David Bowd.
Well, thank you very much, Louise, and thank you, Peter, for your welcome. It's really good to be here face to face. This is the first presentation I've done for 18 months with a live audience, and it's really nice not to be Zooming. And that's no disrespect for those of you on Zoom. I'm just very glad I'm not sitting in my office at home looking at my webcam this time. There are some advantages of being on Zoom. And I've discovered that today, and that you don't have weather on Zoom, but somehow there's weather here. Well, what I want to talk about today is this theme, and I want to talk today about feedback. Now you're thinking, well, feedback, that's every day. We know all about feedback, doing it for years, taken for granted, common sense. What's the issue? Well, what I see my role is this afternoon is to disrupt those notions of feedback. The notions of feedback that we think are very familiar, very cosy, and taken for granted. I want to say, well, hang on. Is this the most fruitful way of thinking about this idea? Are the things that we commonly do under the heading of feedback, are they the most appropriate things to do? And at the end of the day, I want to suggest that we do need to change not just some practices, but more fundamentally, our basic conception of what feedback is. And I want to move it away from basically something that we do, that we offer, we provide a gift to our students, to something where the students are centre stage and they're doing something. We still are providing information to them, but what counts is what the students do. So, this is what I want to focus on. What is the problem with feedback? And there is a problem because it comes up as number one that universities are criticised for in student surveys right around the world. So we need to be not too complacent about this. I want to talk about the revolution that's been occurring in feedback thinking over the last 8 or 9 years, because there's been huge movements in terms of scholarship of feedback for teaching, particularly in the higher education context. I then want to look at what this notion of feedback is now, what is a useful way of thinking about it that we can then base some of our practices on, then talk about designing feedback that works, and then to end with some comments about building students' feedback literacy, because students can't utilise feedback processes unless they've got a really good understanding of feedback, and we can't design really good feedback processes unless we have a really good understanding of feedback. So what is that? So let's start. The problem with feedback. Students complain they don't get enough of it, almost universally. We put an awful lot of time into it, but we think students, well, they don't really take much notice of it, you know. All that work, is there enough payoff in it? We always think that the information we provide to students is much more valuable than the students think that information is. And feedback is typically telling, whether it's telling verbally or telling in writing. And it doesn't have strategies to enable students to actually do something with this useful information. A lot of foundation for that. I won't go into the details of it, but this is the kind of the problematic nature that we were coming to before we started to have this feedback revolution. So this is the dilemma we have. Is it just a matter of doing what we do right now, but doing it more thoroughly, more robustly, more carefully, putting more time in? Is that the solution to the criticism we're getting from students? Or is our current notion of feedback based on a misconception? And of course, you can tell I'm going to argue that it's based on misconception. So, just a little quote from Mark Twain. What gets us into trouble is not what we don't know, it's what we know for sure that just ain't so. And I want to suggest, and of course this image is very dated now, you know. You used to be able to go into departmental offices, you know, and you went in there and there were kind of piles of scripts and assignments, and you asked the people there, what were they? And they said, oh, these are scripts on which the students have received comments, but they haven't picked them up yet. Now, just think about that. Is this feedback if it isn't even received? Can we meaningfully talk about feedback as something we offer, but is not received? And I want to suggest, no, we shouldn't do that at all. So how is this thinking in feedback changed over time? So what we've seen is that a number of scholars in Australia, Hong Kong and the UK have been shifting our notion of feedback away from essentially what it is that we do as teachers, the comments that we offer to students in all sorts of different forms, and saying, hang on, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of it? What's the point of it? Surely the point is it influences students' learning. Well, if it's going to influence students' learning, why are we always concerned with the input and not what follows the input? Why are we concerned with the input and not what precedes the input from the students? So the argument in this revolution is that unless inputs from others lead to worthwhile effects, and those effects are students do something differently in the future than what they did in the past, then what is going on is we're offering hopefully useful information. We are adopting a faith-based strategy. Yeah? And we keep our fingers crossed. You know? Of course, if I utter the right things to the students, all will be well. And of course, it doesn't work like that. So Liz Malloy, who's now at the University of Melbourne, and myself started to look at the models of feedback that we had back in 2013. And we asked ourselves, well, what is it that we normally talk about when we talk about feedback? And we started with 3 eras, if you like, of feedback thinking. Now, we called the first one of these eras Feedback Mark 0, and we didn't call it Feedback Mark 1. And we called it Feedback Mark 0 because everyone called it feedback, but we didn't believe it. We didn't believe it was feedback at all. And the cartoon gives the game away here about what it is. So, Feedback Mark 0 is hopefully useful information is provided to students. We give it, we provide it, and all the action occurs at our end. And that's a typical phrase. And it happens on completion of their work. So students produce something, often in an assignment, whether it's graded or not. They offer it up to us, and they get comments. And we call that feedback. And the cartoon, in a sense, gives the idea there. Well, it makes us feel good, but does it actually have any effect? And of course, no effect, in my terms, no feedback. Doesn't matter what you call it, right? You're pretending you're in the feedback business if there's no effect. So let's think about this. So one of the ways we were thinking about this is we said, well, hang on, there's an awful lot of academics that use feedback in their own disciplines. You know, there are scientists, there are engineers. And in fact, the more you think about it, the whole of the Industrial Revolution couldn't have worked unless these people had got feedback right. Because our society, almost every single process in this room, physical, electrical, mechanical process, depends on feedback. So let's see what we can take from these people that are teaching their students feedback very well right now. Okay. So what does that leave us? Well, first of all, there's hopefully useful information. There is input into the system. Okay. It's done by us. We are providing input into the system. But, and this is the key idea we're taking from those hundreds and hundreds of years of people before us, it's sequenced to require improvement. So there's an input into the system, and the question we always ask in science and engineering, whatever field we use it, what difference does it make? If there's no detectable difference, we've got a piece of a feedback loop, but the feedback loop is not complete. And in the educational context, we give this information to students in time to allow for improved work. So if they're doing their next assignment before they've got this useful information, then it's no bloody good. Too late. And the issue isn't how long from when they handed it in. The crucial timing is how soon before they've got to do some work with it. So we need to think about this turnaround time slightly differently. So, for example, if we take a typical course unit, course module, subject, let's imagine there are 3 activities in it. Doesn't matter whether they're graded or not. If we treat each one of those as completely independent, like activity 1 has a whole lot of learning outcomes, activity 2 has a whole lot of different learning outcomes, and so on and so forth, then what we have done is that we've designed feedback out of the system. Because the next task that students do has got no relationship to the task on which they received hopefully useful information. So we need to think about our tasks not as completely independent from each other, but of overlapping or nested or related in some way, so that students can actually learn from the comments they got on task 1, and that will influence the way they do task 2. But if we design task 2 so that it's got absolutely nothing to do with task 1, then we'll design feedback away. So this is what we called Mark 1. So it was the idea that we must look for effects. No effects, no feedback. Now, of course, you're immediately going to start to see the deficiencies of this model, because this model is dependent upon us providing inputs all the time. And of course, we don't have the time or resources to provide inputs all the time. And indeed, it's not a good thing, because we're wanting students to kind of do things of their own volition. So this brought us to feedback Mark 2. This is the last one. So there's no more Mark 3. So you might come up with Mark 3 this afternoon, but let me know if you do. So feedback Mark 2 is the same in one respect as feedback Mark 1, and that is that we need to notice students' actions. Students' actions are pivotal to this notion of feedback. So there's strong student agency, students participate in it. We might even ask the students, what would be the most useful comments that I could offer you on this work? And we might actually train them to ask for good comments. And we say to them, well, if you don't give us a clue, then you might not get comments that are helpful in your work. So we need to be careful in our feedback processes that we don't encourage inappropriate dependency upon the things that we offer. So it's dialogic in that it starts with something that the students want. It doesn't start by us thrusting unsolicited information under their nose. Because if you think about it, in most social contexts, if somebody comes along and sets you straight on a few things, it's actually going to kind of make you stand back. You think, oh, hang on, what's this person doing here? Do I have a kind of a legitimate contract, social contract with this person to give me unsolicited information about things which are really important to me? So maybe we need to start to think about feedback in sense of a relational process. And if students are going to have to act on useful information, maybe they need to give at least a little guidance on what that useful information might be. We're also in feedback Mark 2 thinking about multiple sources. So we're not just thinking about it's the teacher that provides the information. Of course, we've got class sizes, we've got cohorts such that if we were the only person in the loop providing feedback information, then it's pretty bleak. It's pretty kind of thin. Yeah? We do our best, but if it's just down to us, it's not enough. So how do we involve other people? And how do we mobilise students to involve other people? And of course, the focus of feedback Mark 2 is always, as in any notion of feedback, any legitimate notion of feedback, is looking to the future, forward-looking. By the way, I don't use the word feed forward because if you use the word feed forward, it means you don't understand the concept of feedback. I do apologise for any of you in the audience that frequently use the word feed forward. Like, I know what you mean, but please, try to get feedback right, in which case you won't need this redundant concept. And of course, a part of what we're doing is that we're not just setting students straight on this particular task, we're making an input into them that's about developing their capacity to make judgments about their work. And this will last beyond the immediate task. So we're getting students to think differently about their work. So that's where we came from. Where are we now? Now, a whole bunch of us got one of the very final OLT projects about feedback and how do we make feedback different. And we did a big study across, two large universities. And one of the first things you do, as you have a project, you think, well, hang on, this is about feedback. Let's have a look at the literature, see what the definitions of feedback are. Is this a reasonable place to start? Yes, it's a reasonable place to start. We were devastated. We looked at the literature, and it was terrible. Terrible. There was no definition of feedback that in any way was credible to us. Right? They focused on these teacher input things. We thought, well, hang on, that's archaic. That's operating in a different world. So then we had to make up our own, and this is the one we came up with. First of all, feedback is a process. It is a process and not an input. There are inputs in this process, but it's a process. It's a process in which learners do something. Learners make sense of information from whatever source, us, peers, their family, they've got to make sense of all these sources. Some of those sources are more credible than others. So a part of dealing with feedback is judging credibility of sources, of course. And it's information about their performance. So the students actually have to have done something before they receive information from others. And they need to use it in our definition. So they get this information and they don't just say, thank you very much. They make a plan, they take some action, they make sense of it, and they use it to enhance the quality of their work or their learning processes. So it goes somewhere. So the feedback loop, and that's illustrated in the cartoon, is not completed until the students act in some way. Now, in many cases, the action consists of them looking at the input and saying, well, this person's not credible on this particular matter, I'm not going to act. So that's a part of the feedback process over which we don't have any control. Well, we do have some control because we need to be seen as credible sources. Some peers, some people in their family, some practitioners might not be credible in quite the same way. So where does this leave us? How do we design feedback that works? Well, the other thing that came out of this project was we developed this website. That's the landing page of the website. It doesn't work. We can see the landing page. feedbackforlearning.org. feedbackforlearning.org. And one of the things we did as part of this project is that we surveyed all the students at these two large universities, and we got a decent number of responses. We got 4,500 students responded to us. And we asked them, name the unit or subject that you'd experienced so far in your university career in which you thought the feedback processes were really good. So for these two institutions, we had a list of the subject names, and the thing we want to do is we looked at the ones at the top of the list, and we went off and we tried to find out what was so good about them. The students had said something in their questionnaire about what was good, but we wanted to go straight to the horse's mouth. So we interviewed people, we looked at their materials, we tried to understand how these processes worked. And what we came up with was some case studies. And in these case studies, we tried to understand what excellent feedback practice was as exercised right now, not in theory, but in terms of things that students thought were wonderful. Of course, we needed to go in there and look and see whether we thought it was wonderful too, but luckily, that wasn't a problem. We slightly loaded the list, and we loaded it in two directions. We loaded it to include large student cohorts, and we loaded it so that we had slightly more first-year subjects than the average. Because in a sense, you've got a small class, final year, well, the challenges aren't quite so great in getting it right, shall we say. If you've got 2,000 students in first year lectures, tutes and labs, right, all got to work together, then that's a bit more of a challenge. And you've got to wrangle all these tutors and demonstrators and God knows what. So, I'm not going to go to the website now, but you can go to the website anytime, feedbackforlearning.org, and it takes you to the Monash website, which gives you a clue. Monash was one of the universities. And these are our 7 case studies. If you go there, don't just focus on the ones in your own discipline area, because the really interesting thing is how can someone do it in another discipline, and can we pinch some good ideas? And we've got some really good ideas here. For example, how do you give a class of 1,500 students detailed feedback on multiple occasions during their subjects? And how do you do it in such a way that the tutors give really high quality feedback information? So there's an example here of a course in which the feedback quality is moderated, not the marks, the feedback quality, that is the information provided to students, is moderated. So that's just a tease to get you to kind of go and have a look at the website. And these are some of the kind of questions that came up from this project in terms of feedback design. The first one should be obvious, but it isn't obvious. It isn't obvious to students. On many, many, many occasions, students do not know the purpose of feedback, and they do not know their role in it. If they knew their role in it, they wouldn't actually have these great piles of scripts that they never look at. So, at the simplest possible level, we need to introduce students to the idea that feedback is a process. It isn't some ritual that we engage in because we feel wonderful about it. Right? You know, this is the right that we do as a university teacher, that we make all these comments on students' work. Now, we don't really care what effect that has. We don't really care whether they read it or not. But having done it, it makes us feel wonderful. Well, let's scotch that idea, okay? Students need to know the purpose and their role in it. Can learners make sense of the information they receive? Many occasions, when I look at people's feedback comments, what students are getting is detailed and accurate information about their work. That's not good enough. Accurate and detailed information about work is okay, it's good. It's better than inaccurate and vague information about their work. But the question is, can students use it? Can they run with it? Can they make sense of it? And very often we provide students with information which they're not in a position to utilise. So we need to think very carefully of all the, let's imagine that we could say a dozen different things about this particular piece of work. Which ones are we going to spend the time in putting in front of students? Yeah? Because we can probably say a dozen things about everything we receive, but we don't have the time and energy to do that. So what are the 2 or 3 key points that you focus on, and why? I would argue that you focus on the key points, which means that the students are actually going to be enthused and interested in doing something about it themselves, and it's going to go somewhere. So our mechanism provided through which learners can take action. So, for example, is there a subsequent activity this semester in which students can actually make sense of this useful information and they're thinking about it to do something else and show that they've kind of come good, that they've improved in some sense? So is there a sequence? Now, is there a sequence across subjects? Well, that's more challenging unless we think programmatically that's actually not going to work. So I want to start with within the semester it working. And of course, what effects should we be looking for to ensure that the feedback process has worked? And the obvious effect is, do students do better on the issues in which they've had drawn to their attention subsequently? Now, we can't absolutely attribute it to the feedback, but it's a pretty good intermediate indicator. And this nonsense that, once they've been out in industry for a few years, they'll really see the value of the comments I made about their work. Give me a break, right? Yeah, that may be true, But as an educator myself, I want to see some intermediate effect. I don't want to wait 2-3 years to see whether they do this in industry, because I'm not going to be there anyway. Yeah, that's somewhere else. I want to see something whilst they're still with me that indicates that I have not been wasting my time. So let's not act on this sort of faith-based notion of feedback. Let's actually have some evidence during the semester that it's actually done some good. So one of the things we followed up with was this book here. This is an advert for the book on the left here. So these are some of the issues that we are focusing on. Some I've mentioned already. Start with the student, provide opportunities for action, build early feedback opportunities. Feedback early in the semester is worth so much more than feedback at the end. Right? Doing things, it's not propitious to offer a lot of stuff on feedback at the end of semester. Why? Because students are going to go off and do something else and they're not going to be able to utilise it. Feedback information earlier in the semester, while you've got still some influence over them and they're still doing things with you, it's got a much, much bigger payoff. So let's redeploy our energies from late in the semester, late in the course, to early in the semester, earlier in the course. Constructing feedback-rich environments. I'm not going to go into all of these. Multi-source feedback I've mentioned. Co-construction. Rubrics have got very fashionable, shall we say, in Australian higher education. And by and large, they're probably a good thing. Probably, I have to say that with gritted teeth sometimes, because often they're really terrible. But they don't carry the carriage on their own. Now, a good rubric has what the learning outcomes are, what the levels of achievement are, and indications of, what you look for at each level of achievement. But, and this is a big but, if we think that students can interpret that on their own, well, it doesn't work that way. If students could actually make sense of your rubric, they should be teaching your subject, not being enrolled in it. Okay? Because almost every rubric I've seen requires a level of sophistication and understanding of the meaning of some of those things there that the students, either they don't have or they've only got a partial grasp of them. So the rubric itself doesn't speak clearly enough. And working with students' affect. I'll say a bit more later. A lot of work being done in business and industry, surprisingly enough, about eliciting feedback. So how do I get comments about my work? Big literature on that in business, which we've almost completely ignored in higher education. And one of the things that we did a little paper saying, well, there's all this stuff out there, how can we actually use it in the higher education space? In fact, you've got one of the world experts here on eliciting feedback in the business context, Frederick, in business, Frederick. Yes. Yeah. And the other thing we need to think about is that we conventionally think of feedback in whatever the traditional ways that we've given feedback, written comments, face-to-face, whatever. The important thing to bear in mind is there are many modes of doing it. And one of the things that's come up in our case studies, and it's becoming more and more apparent in the literature, is the use of audio and video feedback is more powerful. But that's not the really good thing as far as we're concerned. Not only is it more powerful, but it's easier for us to do. It takes less time. So we can actually communicate more thoroughly with more nuance by sitting in front of our laptop, putting on our webcam and recording 2 minutes than we can by writing out that information. We wouldn't probably write out that information in sufficient detail. We look at the students' work on the screen and we give a commentary on it and we record it like a conversation. We address the students by name. Students love it because they think it's personalised, but of course you don't know who this student is that you're commenting on if it's a large class. But it helps engender this connection. And of course, screencast with audio comments is the thing to do in subjects that it isn't about text, it's about diagrams, equations, and so on. So that's just the kind of extending the range. So is this enough to improve feedback? Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the comments you make on students' work aren't very, very important, right? But it's only a part of the picture. So we can get that right, and if we don't pay attention to the other bits, then it won't work. And the other thing which is very disturbing when you look at the feedback literature is that a lot of feedback information that's provided leads to negative learning. What do I mean by that? It means that students know less after you've commented on their work than they did before, right? This is a common phenomenon, right? So be very careful that you don't fall into that trap rather. So the other thing I want to make is a very, very important distinction which makes a huge difference. There are two things that we typically do when we give comments to students about their work. One, there's the mark, we give a mark, and we justify the mark. And typically we justify the mark in terms of a rubric nowadays, or a marking scheme or something like that. The other thing we provide is feedback information. They are not the same thing. Mark justification is backward looking. It's looking at what the students have done. What's the quality of their work then? It doesn't say anything in itself about how they can improve and develop. So we need feedback information which is forward-looking, which is about where the students go next, where they can take it, what the possibilities are. And when we're providing this information, we need to kind of tease these two things apart and say, well, yes, we need the mark and the justification. And at the end of semester, we need the mark and the justification. But also, we need feedback information which is necessarily forward-looking. It's not feed-forward, it's just what feedback really is. And there's a paper we've written which kind of teases that out and explains the dynamics of that based upon some real data. So I don't normally in these sessions kind of do tips for teachers, but if you hang on to these slides, I'm sure they'll be accessible afterwards. These are 10 things that you could do easily next time you've got an assignment. And I would suggest if you do two or three of these, you will actually transform the student's experience of feedback. I'm not going to run through them now, but have a think about those. So, if students are going to utilise feedback, well, they need to understand what this thing is. So what is it they need to understand? And that's led us to this notion of feedback literacy. And these are the things that are elements of feedback literacy. Students appreciate feedback and how it works. They understand how judgments get made. Both receiving judgments from other people and doing it for themselves. They know how to manage their own affect and emotions. Because some of the negative effects is the students get so disheartened that they can't move on. So we need to know about how to manage that, and also about the notion of taking action. And what we did is we took this initial idea of feedback literacy and we got hold of some data from this big project, and we did a secondary analysis of the data to identify what are the competencies that students need if they're going to be feedback literate. And these are the categories, there's 7 categories, and each one of them is spelled out in detail, which I've put as an appendix at the end of the slides. One is about commitment of feedback as improvement. They see that. They accept that feedback is an active process and not something they sit down there and says, give me feedback. Teach me, as it were. It doesn't work like that. We need to actually help students to understand that learning is necessary and active process. What skills do students need to elicit information? Not just from us, but from anyone. A very important skill. And students are often very, very inhibited about it. So if you actually go into your next large class and try to elicit these things from students, you'll get a bit of silence. So we need to kind of prepare them for that. How to process feedback information, how to work with emotions, how to see feedback as a reciprocal thing. It's not just a matter of things that people do to me, but I have a role in helping other people. How does that work? Peer feedback, but it's a part of the overall feedback thing. And how do they enact outcomes? I'm just going to run ahead now because of time, so I want to leave enough time for questions. One of the things we've done is we've developed a feedback literacy instrument which we've been trialling, and shortly we hope to be able to release to the world. So if somebody wants to track the feedback literacy of their students, we have an instrument that will help in that. So if you're interested in that, let me know. We've also examined ways in which we can embed feedback literacy in courses and how to promote in normal everyday things, not add-ons, but how do we actually do our normal tasks within a normal subject to help promote students' skills in eliciting, processing and enacting feedback. And of course we need to be feedback literate to ourselves. So we actually did a similar exercise in which we try to work out, well, what are the feedback literacies that we as academics need? And we need them both at the micro level in terms of giving comments to students about their work, but we also need it at the macro level in terms of designing whole programs so that feedback works within the program. So I'll end on this slide. I'm going to end on this slide. So we have plenty of questions. So one of the things that we do in our courses is that we try to ensure that we give equal treatment to students. So we don't actually discriminate between students. They have the same curriculum, same learning outcomes, same assignments. They are judged on the same criteria, etc., because it is fair. Just one problem. Students are different from each other and they've got different needs. So how do we accommodate those different needs while still treating them all similarly? Well, feedback is one of the few mechanisms that we have in our programs to do that. So it's actually probably more important than we think, because it's the way we adjust the reality of what the student really needs right now as distinct from what the whole group needs. So we need to think about designing feedback processes around what students do, and they may or may not go with graded work. Giving comments to students is part of the process. Without active involvement of students, it ain't feedback, right? Whatever it is, it's something, but it ain't feedback. And we also need to think about completing the feedback loop. And that's where it ends. And again, feedback is always judged not on the input, but on the output. Did it make a difference in the end? So, thank you very much for your attention.
Peter, I cannot thank you enough for such a thought-provoking and excellent presentation. I'm thinking about how to frame my feedback appropriately so that it is
well, you've got to work out, am I or am I not going to take action on it?
Well, the action that we hope you will take is you have kindly said that you'll answer some questions for us, because I know there are some coming through. If you are here in the room with us and you'd like to ask a question, Remy will come around with the microphone So just raise your hand. And meanwhile, for those of you who are online, our lovely colleague Alex here is going to read out the questions that have come from our colleagues who are online. So I'll hand to Alex first whilst Remy takes the mic around.
Yes, I have. Pop-up has just come up over the question I was trying to ask. Somebody has put in the chat, that's a fascinating point that you made about students knowing less after feedback sometimes. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Yes. Well, I mentioned already that one of the reasons they might know less is that they start to lose faith in what they know. And they think, I don't know anything, so I'm going to kind of let go of the things that I do know. And they've learned less. So one of the things that points to is the importance of building on what the students can do well in order to move forward. Otherwise, students might inadvertently think that they've got something wrong which they haven't got wrong. So that's one illustration of students learning less. But luckily the literature is mostly based upon schools where they learn a lot less. So there's much less literature in higher education where they learn less. Maybe it's just because we haven't done enough studies, of course.
Yes, one always has to be selective in where one draws one's data from. The next question is from the floor.
Hi, that was a terrific talk. That's my feedback. So ultimately, the mastery that students demonstrate in the class, come out with, is going to be a combination of their initial input and what they do with the feedback that you've provided. And so I'm wondering, would you advocate, or do you think that their early assignments that they complete or the early drafts that they give you should not be graded? Or are there certain aspects that you would recommend are worth grading and others that maybe we should not grade in anticipation of them using the feedback to come out with a more sophisticated product?
Yeah. The issue of grading or not grading is actually quite a complex issue. For example, there are a number of universities in the UK that discount all grades offered in first year. So grades offered in first year do not count as part of a grade point average. Now let's think about this. Why should a student be penalised by a poor piece of work they did in the first month or two of enrolment in the university? They actually overcome that, they do fantastic good work. Why are we kind of putting that as a millstone around their neck? The thing about grades in feedback processes is one of the things that students also like to know is how well are they tracking. So grades have two functions. They have a function of classifying and limiting a student and providing something that they can't escape from. But they also have an indicative function of saying, well, this is about where you stand at the moment. Now, unfortunately, students have great difficulty in discriminating between these two uses. So my view is that you play down, my personal view as a teacher, I play down grades everywhere. I will not enter into discussions with students about grades. I will enter into discussions with them about learning outcomes, levels of achievement, what they need to do, everything else. But if they want to talk about grades, then I'm not in that conversation. So we say that students are obsessed with grades, and they're obsessed with grades because we are obsessed with grades. Right? So stop it. Stop it. Okay? So let's not reinforce these bad habits where they're focused on the grades and not what the grade substantively means. The important thing is what does the grade actually really indicate about their work? That's what we need the debate with students about, not the grade itself. So yes, I'm not opposed to there being grades and feedback, but we need to recognise that all the studies that have been done that show students, you put in front of students a grade and feedback, comments, then some students will only look at the grade and say, thank you very much, forget about the rest. Now, do we want them to engage with that or not? And offering them a grade up front can actually distract them from the hopefully useful information we provide. It's not a simple answer. We need to work out how does it work in a particular context. In some courses, in some contexts, you can get away with not having grades at all. When I was at UTS, I was the head of school, and we had not a single grade in any course in the whole school. Unfortunately, I went on study leave once, and the academic board overthrew this. And I got back, and we had bloody grades. And our students got jobs just fine, thank you very much.
David, thank you. The next question is coming from our online cohort of attendees.
Yes, you did talk about this a little bit, but perhaps you have some more to say. We have a question from Jasper, who asks, can you quickly explain what feedback literacy is? Does feedback literacy connect with what you meant by quality feedback that contributes to students' agency?
Feedback literacy, and the slides have disappeared, so I can't actually go back to the slide. What feedback literacy is what the capabilities students need in order to engage with feedback. Okay. So it's a question of asking ourselves, are our students sufficiently well equipped that they can utilise the wonderful feedback and the feedback designs we put in front of them? And for students to be able to utilise those practices, so we can fix up our courses just fine, but if students have got insufficient literacy about how feedback works, that's the detailed version, which is, if you want to see how it's spelled out, I don't know whether you can read it or not. If you can read it, it's got some of the details. We need to help our students understand how feedback processes works, and we need to be able to identify in them that they're able to utilise that information. So it's not a unitary thing. We can't just have a really great feedback design. If students don't really understand it and they don't really know how to operate within it, then it's not going to work. So that's where the feedback literacy comes in.
David, thank you. We have time for one last question, which is from the floor.
Hello, thank you very much. That was incredible. I teach a engineering design course, and your comment about audio or video feedback as an alternative to text really intrigued me. I mark a lot of drawings, so there's, I think, a really good opportunity to utilise a different format and provide a lot more useful targeted feedback. I was just wondering how students receive it. One of the perceptions I know students have is they like to at least see a lot of feedback, or they can feel like if you don't give a lot of feedback, I'm sort of thinking turn it in at this point, they feel like, you know, they didn't get a fair go there. When it comes to audio, how do they receive it? Do they feel like it's a lot of feedback, useful feedback?
Yeah, the studies that have been done are actually very positive in terms of student reactions. And the students like it for two reasons. One, they think it's personalised. They don't think you've got a standard kind of, pot, a database of standard comments, and they just kind of, you just, well, oh, this is a number 23, and I'll give it to the student. That they realise that because you're doing it face-to-face in real time, that there's an authenticity about it. Even if you don't know them personally, there's a kind of realness about it, which is very engaging. So students are engaged in audio and video feedback much more extensively than in written feedback. There's one downside, and the downside is that it's much easier to go back with a written comment and say, oh, well, there's a comment here which I need to act upon. In audio or video feedback, it's hard to kind of rewind easily and actually find specific comments. But other than that major downside, the research suggests that it's all positive.
Sadly, we do not have time for more questions. However, we're going to try and persuade David to stay around with us a little longer, so he may be available. Would you please join me in thanking him on our behalf? I have a suitably festive little bag of goodies to thank you so very much for coming and gracing us with that wonderful presentation about feedback here at UNSW. Yep. Thank you very much indeed. It's now my chance to introduce the next section, and that is to ask Professor Peter Heslin to come and join me up here on the podium to tell you about a wonderful new innovation we have this year that has come from the Scientia Education Academy And this is an initiative that Peter's worked with the Academy but has led, and I'm going to hand over to him now to tell you all about it. Thank you very much, Peter.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to acknowledge the Bejigal people as the traditional custodians of this land and to invite you to think about them and their unceded lands and their contributions as we work through this afternoon in terms of how much we have to learn from them about some of the topics that we're talking about here today, such as inspiring people, such as building connections, and leveraging opportunities for diversity. It's my great pleasure to represent our wonderful Scientia Education Academy to introduce to you these new Exemplary Teaching Practice Awards. So the purpose of them is to unearth and share widely applicable, useful teaching practices, things that are already happening around campus but could happen more broadly if we simply knew about them. So the idea is to make it much easier for many people to know about them. Provide everyone who teaches here an opportunity to be recognised for the good work that they do, and expand the conversations about what works. My dream for these awards is that someone at a line in waiting for coffee would say, "Hey, I saw your video about X, that was really cool. I'm going to try it this week." That'd be cool. And ultimately to populate the new Teaching News You Can Use website. So what this is all about is, there are 6 teaching challenges that we've identified here. You can see there's assessment and feedback, building student communities, challenging and supporting students to engage in active learning, leveraging student diversity, and forming links to others in terms of professional practice. And the idea is that applicants for this award submitted to one of these categories. And the idea is that we would curate and pick the best ones and put them on this website, which will be available early next year. So people could go on there and say, look, I'd like some fresh ideas about how to inspire students. And within 10 minutes, they can see 5 different ideas, locally generated and shared from colleagues on campus. So after that 10 minutes, hopefully they'll say, here's 2 or 3 ideas I'm going to go and share. Now I should say, both the ideas on the website and those indeed who are the winners will not be fresh news for everybody. In some cases, there'll be things that say, wow, I've never thought of that, I'll try it. In one of the cases, one of the winners, I thought, well, I'd thought about that and thought it's not for me. But when I hear the way one of the winners described doing this, I think, I'm going to revisit my assumption about that and give it a go. So it's really about fresh ideas from fresh faces that I'm very excited and grateful to Merlin and to Louise, and also Patsy Polly and Nalini Patha, the leaders of the Scientia Education Academy, for supporting getting going. For Sam Hegarty, particularly for spending many, many hours under great pressure to get the website all ready, both for people to submit and then for everyone to review, and then to start to build this website that you'll all be able to access soon. And also very much to Yvonne Fung, Dorota Witz-Burka and Remy Hatsumi for their wonderful marketing in getting lots of people to apply. And I've got to say, the dream was maybe 30 or 40 people would be great. I was rather shocked that in the last hour, the applications more than doubled. And by the time we removed the redundancies, etc., we had 132 applications. So please join me in thanking the 132 people who stepped up to get this going. That's unreal. That's terrific engagement with this mission to say, how can we collectively enhance teaching effectiveness across UNSW? And I'd like to say that every single one of those is going to get feedback on, from at least 2 and often 3 reviewers next week. So that's all 132 people. And of those, by the way, they're all judged according to our criteria here. So how useful are they for addressing one of the 6 targeted challenges I just identified? How broadly could they be applied in other places around campus? There's some great ideas that apply just within a particular faculty, but here we're really trying to stitch together the UNSW campus community. Here, Canberra, our other campuses too. And also, how clearly is it communicated? So we can listen and we don't need to play it back. We can say, right, got it, that's a cool idea. Or got it, that's not for me. Either way, so you can get it straight up. So many applications. It's the biggest cliche in the world. Oh, there were so many, it was hard to pick, but it truly, truly was. There's just gold in this, and you'll be so excited to see them all. They're just wonderful. I also need to thank this bunch of heroes, because in planning out how many people do I need to review 2 or 3 each, if I'm getting 20 or 30, well, 8 or 10 people should do it. When all of a sudden I've got a whole lot more, I had 3 business days at an extremely busy time to have all this reviewing done. And all of these folks from my SCA fellow colleagues stepped up, so please join me in thanking them too. And so, finally, before I tell you the finalists and the winners, I've got a special challenge for you. And here's the challenge. I want you, and we could think of this as a process challenge now, or more broadly, as a listening challenge. Who's listening to what I'm about to say, and who's not listening? And the interesting thing is we're all going to see who was listening. So here's the challenge. When I announce the winner, please do not applaud. And the reason is because I've got 15 minutes to show you 12 minutes of videos, plus give out the awards. So what will happen is, the moment, if all goes to plan, the moment I say who won, their video will start. At that point, if your video just started, please head over here to Rami and stand here. The moment it finishes, that's when everyone applauds the video and you receiving your certificate, and then we roll on with the next one. So we'll have 6 applauses and not 12. And by the way, instructions are hard to remember, so in the spirit of universal delight of learning, I'll give it to you in writing as well as verbally. It's hard to remember, and if you think I'm making your life tough, you can laugh at me when I forget that I'm trying not to shake hands with people, because that's extremely hard to do, and I may well forget that too. So if you come up here to win, if you can help me stay on track with that too. And with that, let's get on with what we're doing here. So in the first category, our finalists were Ben Kelly with his rubric marking game, Jenny Richmond with the power of audio, feedback that is fast, personalised and useful, and Mary Zornazi with class collaborative marking scales. And the winner of this category is Jenny Richmond.
Hi, my name is Jenny Richmond, and I teach in the School of Psychology and the Faculty of Science. My 2-minute tip today is about assessment and feedback. As lecturers and tutors, we spend a really long time giving students feedback that is designed to help develop their writing skills. And sometimes we're not necessarily sure whether students even look at it, let alone try and use it to improve their next piece of work. In the last few years, I've started using audio feedback to make the process of giving feedback faster, more personalised, and I think more useful to students. I mostly use the voice memo app on my phone, and I just record what I'm thinking about the student's work as I read, which allows me to make feedback that's more detailed, more personalised, and less confronting. I can explain not just what could be improved, but how, and I can use the tone of my voice to convey that I really care about their development as a writer. While with track changes and bubble comments, students can just click accept all without internalising the feedback, using audio means that students really have to digest what I'm saying, but they can play it over and over again if something doesn't make sense. When I'm giving feedback on thesis drafts for honours or PhD students, I pop a series of 10-minute recordings into a shared OneDrive folder. I've also used audio recently to give 3 or 4 minutes of feedback to undergraduate students who are doing group presentations. I was able to comment on what I thought was great about their talks and what I thought they should consider for next time they were giving this kind of presentation. Students commented that they liked the amount of detail that they got, and even when the feedback was fairly critical, it wasn't discouraging. Voice memo isn't the only option. The Turnitin and Pair Mark tool allows you to record 3 minutes of audio for each student. And if you use the Atto editor in Moodle, you can record audio or video wherever you would write within Moodle. So if you're looking to make your feedback process faster, more personalised, and I think more useful, try switching to audio.
Well done. Thank you. Congratulations, Jenny. Okay, in our second category of building student communities, we have Emma Jane with her video on using intros to build student communities in online classrooms, Miranda Bruce for building community with themes, and Nicholas Gilmore, Peter Neal, Sarah Grundy, and Dominic Van Gennep with theirs on impromptu design. And the winner of this one is Nicholas Gilmore and team.
Building student communities can
sorry,
be
I'm breaking
challenging
my
when
rules,
we're teaching
and you're following
remotely.
me.
First year students may have never met each other or even set foot on campus. And in online classes, many can't or won't turn on their cameras. In my media entrepreneurship course, I use video intros to kickstart a series of community building activities and also to walk students step by step towards their major assignments. In week 1, students record a brief video intro in which they respond to a series of silly icebreakers as well as more serious questions about their interests and values. Everyone teaching into the course posts one too to underline the fact that we're all in this together. Students then browse through these posts and reach out to people they think they might click with to form the startup teams they work in for the rest of term. These posts become one of the most visited sections of our course Moodle page. Students return again and again to suss each other out, and I do the same. Meanwhile, I use the basic presentation techniques and production skills these posts require to help students level up from digital literacy to digital fluency. This enables students to submit a very polished and professional video pitch for their final assignment. To further bolster this sense of community, I set weekly leadership and participation tasks. Students are asked to provide ongoing feedback on the progression of each other's startups, sign up for the user feedback experiments required to test these new entrepreneurial ventures, post tips and share resources on the forums, help fellow students who are struggling, and find their own ways to give back to the course community. Students report forming close friendships and a sense of camaraderie and common purpose that rivals and in some cases even surpasses what's possible on campus.
Congratulations. And I'm sorry, that one was super tight. Emma Jane won that one. Is Emma here? Good, okay. We'll move along with our next one. And this would be in the category of challenging and supporting students to engage in active learning. So we have Ben Golder with his essay peer review scheme, Lana Lee with Jamboards and Pear Deck, online tools to increase student engagement, and Simon Lloyd, the upside down so what triangle. And the winner of this one is Lana Lee.
Hi, my name is Lana Lee, and I'm a sessional demonstrator and tutor from the School of Biotechnology and Biomolecular Sciences. The teaching challenge I am addressing is challenging and supporting students to engage in active learning. In 2020, the biggest challenge I faced with the transition to online teaching was an overall lack of student engagement and motivation to learn. To address this issue, I developed interactive activities using the digital teaching tool Google Jamboards for a second stage molecular biology course. Google Jamboards encouraged collaboration and created a safe online learning environment for students to ask and answer questions anonymously. In response to student feedback, I also implemented the use of Pear Deck, an add-on for Google Slides that allows students to respond individually to questions without seeing peers' responses, thus giving students opportunities to develop their own critical thinking skills. The different range of hands-on interactive activities were perfect for in-class, low-stakes formative assessments to check students' understanding of content being learnt. I actively sought and evaluated student feedback for each online discussion and used that feedback to design new activities to promote student participation and teamwork whilst boosting motivation and engagement. The implementation of these teaching tools not previously used in my school to support my online teaching delivery was immensely successful, and every week I shared these online resources with my colleagues to support their own teaching. Students appreciated the visual, hands-on nature of the activities, which helped keep them actively engaged and learning in online discussions throughout the term in a fun and interactive way. Beyond online teaching, these tools are easily adaptable for in-class blended or hybrid learning formats, including lectures, tutorials, and practicals.
Okay, and we're almost on time here, fantastic. For inspiring students, we have wonderful videos by Marka Barthwell-Datta, Nicholas Apothos and Will Clapton on inspiring students by making complex foundational text accessible with video, and Monica's was by vulnerability as a place for mutual learning. And finally, we have Steve Most's one on inspiring by building connection. And the winner of this category is Steve Most.
My name is Steve Most. I'm an associate professor in the UNSW School of Psychology, and the teaching challenge I'll be addressing today is inspiring students. Many of us have gotten used to presentations where the slides are the focus and the presenter is just a small talking head in the corner. But that's not how learning works best. Consider a classic study from my field. Babies were exposed to Mandarin, either played over speakers or spoken by someone speaking Mandarin in person. It was that second group who learned the language better. Critically, this isn't a baby thing, this is a human thing. We learn best through our connections with others. So I recommend putting yourself front and center. Zoom lets you put yourself in front of your slides, and it's available through UNSW IT. Shift the balance between yourself and the slides so that your slides take a backseat as merely the tools that they are. Nobody's ever been inspired by a slide.
Who can argue with that?
Chances are that you yourself were once inspired by a teacher that you had a connection with. Maybe you could relate to them as a fellow traveler who loved what they were doing. And now we're in a position to do the same. What an amazing privilege of a position to be in. My favorite evidence that putting in the effort to reach out to students makes a difference comes from the spontaneous emails that I've received from students telling me that this is exactly what helped them love the material that they were learning. They say that education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. By reaching out to make connections, we can help strike the match.
Okay, for our next category of leveraging student diversity, we have Bradley Hastings with No, You Can't Choose Your Teammates, and here's why. We have Namani Vijayananika with hers on embracing student diversity in general education courses. And finally, we have Will Phelps with using small group discussion to leverage diversity. And the winner of this one is Brad Hastings.
Hi, my name's Bradley Hastings from the School of Management and Governance. I'd like to talk to you about leveraging student diversity. Now, I don't know about you, but when I put students into teams, they always ask, can I choose my teammates? Can I work with people I already know? Now, my answer is no. And my reason is I want students to experience the benefits of working in diverse teams. Now, my previous approach to explaining this was to show students the data. The plethora of research that shows that diverse teams are more efficient and more effective. But this didn't work. So what I've turned to are two experiential activities that allow students to experience the benefits of diversity. And the first one is smashing stereotypes. A simple, I am, but I'm not. I'm Aussie, but I'm not a surfer. It's a great way for students to have a bit of fun, break the ice, and realize that they might be going into a team situation with a preconceived stereotype about their teammates. Now, the second and the main activity is what I call talking walls. So each student takes a flip chart, and at the top of that flip chart, they write something that they want to get better at. And then we change colour pens, and the students then go around the room and they write their ideas to help that student achieve the goal. Now, it works equally well in an online environment, as I'm demonstrating with a Google Worksheet acting as a virtual whiteboard. The key is the debrief. I ask students, what did you learn from that activity? And without a doubt, each and every student says they learnt something new, something that they wouldn't have thought about by themselves. And that's a great way for students to experience the benefits of diversity and realise they need to work in diverse teams.
Great stuff. And now for our last one, and I'm proud to say we're even on time, in the category of linking learning to professional, disciplinary, industry and/or personal contexts. Our three finalists are Chris Jackson, imagining the use of experts in our teaching, reimagining I should say, Megan Calusi with her novel interactive workshop introducing mental health disorders and the mental health system to medical students, and finally Michael Stevens on creating an authentic virtual research and industry conference for students. And the winner of this final category is Michael Stevens.
My name is Dr. Michael Stevens from the Graduate School of Biomedical Engineering. The teaching challenge that I will address is linking learning to professional, disciplinary and industry contexts. For coordination of the Biomedical Engineering thesis course, each term I physically recreate a research conference in which students present a poster of their research project to academic and industry representatives. During COVID-19 lockdowns, with students unable to meet physically, it was a challenge to give learners this same conference experience that is so important to their professional development. Static video conferencing tools like Teams or Zoom are not suitable because interactions are forced via breakout rooms and are therefore very inorganic. To address this, I innovated by piloting a new online meeting space, GatherTown, that replicates the real-world professional conference environment. You can see me as an avatar wandering around a virtual conference hall and examining poster boards. You can see that video chat's open as I approach the poster space, so I'm only in a video call with the student and those near me. As soon as I walk away, I can no longer hear that person presenting. And you can see this approach enables students to present their work one-on-one or one-on-two with any approaching academic or industry partners. And the key at these encounters is not forced, enabling students to have genuine, natural encounters as they would when navigating a real-world professional industry context. Students inform the development of this space. In week 7, we held a soft launch where students got a chance to get used to the environment whilst also providing feedback that was adapted and used in the week 11 final conference. The platform was very well received, particularly among students and staff who'd been experiencing Zoom fatigue throughout 2020 and 2021. In addition to the excellent feedback, this platform has been adopted within UNSW and through other industry and university networks. The platform is very easy to use, so any staff member could create a room today and pilot it in their teaching practice. One suggestion I would make is that you should supplement GatherTown with digital resources such as a digital program in order to help attendees find their way around the conference.
Okay, thank you everyone. I'd just like to make 2 final comments. One, thank you again to Yvonne and Remy and Dorota for keeping the show on that track. It was quite a challenge to do all this in that time. And finally, most excitedly, not only is the website coming out all in the new year, but there'll also be the policy and procedure for you to submit your entries to add to this. So we'd like this thing to grow, to be permanent, to get ever better. Now, I should say the challenge is going to increase, because one of the criteria is there's no point having 5 videos that deliver basically the same idea. So part of the challenge will be to look at already what's there and say, what have I got that might be useful and broadly applicable to my colleagues that we don't already have, and then put that in. And we'll really welcome those entries and look forward to building up the repository of great ways to enhance student learning at UNSW. Thank you, everyone.
Peter, thank you so much for a wonderful initiative on behalf of the Academy and on behalf of all your colleagues. I think it's as you saw from the smiling faces and the interest, it's a wonderful initiative, and we thank you most sincerely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, you now have a 10-minute break. There's tea and coffee outside, afternoon tea time. Once we come back from the break, what we're going to do is have a debate. So please do be back in time for that. David Bowd has very kindly agreed to stay if you'd like to ask him some questions, and you also have the opportunity to speak to all our wonderful awardees and runners-up from that fantastic competition. Thank you, Peter, very much. And thank you, everyone. See you back here, 2:40, 2:42. Thank you. Hi everyone, thank you so much for taking your seats. You know what we're like, we're 8 minutes behind schedule. But our chair for the debate is just moving up, and we have our wonderful debate teams up here, including 2 fabulous students from our UNSW debating team, who of course are proving to be far more proficient than their academic colleagues, but we'll see how they perform now.
So, welcome everyone. I'm very excited. We haven't had one of these debates for a while, but I think they're a great idea. Someone joked that they hope that university policy isn't decided this way, but actually, I can't think of a better way. At the end, I'll summarise how university policy is decided, and we can debate whether it should be decided by debates. So look, I want to welcome all the wonderful people who are online and tuning in from home, and I hope you all enjoy it. And all the people who are here, it's lovely to see you all. It's lovely to be back on campus, to be in Leighton Hall, and to have before us this debate. I do want to thank the people for doing it. Whenever I'm asked to do something like this, it's both a privilege and a burden. You know, it's because you've got to do some work, and then we'll all be assessing it afterwards. There'll be an exam on the debate, but I really do, and I particularly thank the students for doing it. I sometimes think we learn as much from our students as they learn from us. That's another debate. We've got 6 minutes for each speaker. We've got a topic. When we started, the topic was a very long topic, and then we got it down to students need exams, and so you just have to remember that. I think, so it's on the side screens. I think that we're behind time, so I'll cut it off there. I'll introduce the first speaker for the affirmative, Aman Mohammed. Over to you, Aman.
Hello? Is that audible? Okay, excellent. Socrates, a man loved by all, once said, "An unexamined life is not worth living." And that's what we support in this affirmative team today. I'm going to do a couple of things in this speech. First, I'll do a little bit of setup about what this debate actually means and how it operates. Second, I'll tell you why students need exams, because we have to have something to complain about. Thirdly, I'll tell you why students need exams, because we need to know how to BS, bluster, and bluff our way through life. And lastly, why students need exams, because the format gives us an excuse when we do badly academically. Firstly, on a little bit of setup, 3 things to note in this speech. The first thing is the burden of this debate. As we all know, the topic of this debate is that students need exams. That's an empirical statement. That means that all we have to do is just prove that in some way students empirically need exams. Note that means that negative team cannot win this debate by claiming that maybe exams are bad for anxiety, or maybe it compromises other needs like mental health, those minutiae there, because that doesn't take away from the fact that students still might need exams, right? In the way that, for instance, a third world child might have to choose between water and food, and maybe one need is more important than the other, that doesn't matter. They're still both important needs. So that's what we have to prove in this debate. The second thing I want to note here is that we'll probably prove this really, really easily, and that's because I'm the most important person in this debate. Why? Because I'm actually a student. Alicia might be a student, that's true, but she's a first-year student, and I'm a second-year student, which means I've got more student experience. But also, I've been in selective schools, I've been in a public school, and in a private school overseas, which means that I have way more student knowledge and way more experience as to how exams actually operate. Now, you might be thinking, well, maybe that's true, but this opposition team has way more student experiences than me. They've probably done their masters. True, but importantly, this debate is happening now about students now and exams now, not students and exams 2,000 years ago, which is why my lived experiences will always be way more important than theirs will in this debate, and that's why we'll have to win. The third thing I'll note is that they might say, well, you know, exams are very stressful. A couple of preemptive things here. Number one, Adrian will give you points to the contrary to suggest why actually assessments and other things that they might stand for are way more stressful. But secondly, I would note that exams are probably not necessary necessarily intrinsically all that difficult to begin with. Why? Because as Alex tells me, they're basically just time-limited forms of assessments that are limited to what's covered in the actual course in the first instance. For instance, multiple choice quizzes can be counted as exams, and I'm sure I'd prefer that way more than a research essay, probably way less stressful. But no, even if it's not less stressful, we can probably implement open book policies or probably have wellness weeks to change the attitudes and climates around which students do take exams to make them way less stressful. Okay, first argument then. Students need exams because we need to have something about which to complain. No, why do students generally need something about to complain? 4 reasons. Firstly, it feels really good to complain. Secondly, it actually assists us in legitimately getting things out, getting out of things that we might have otherwise had to do. So for instance, students love to complain and do things like lecture bashing. If we didn't have exams to complain about, we might have to listen to the lectures in the first instance, which sounds bloody awful. Thirdly, it probably makes us feel really heard and makes us bond together. For instance, I go and complain about exams at brunch with my friends, and I wouldn't have an excuse to see them otherwise. And fourthly, it probably makes for really great memes like the ones you see on BuzzFeed. Neg might say, well, maybe you can complain about other things, so you don't really need exams to complain in the first instance. Why does taking away exams equal taking away a student's legitimate ability to complain? Firstly, not everyone has legitimate things to complain about, because if you went to the Sydney Church of England Grammar School and have parents who are millionaires, and you're a white male, for instance, it's probably very difficult to find some form of oppression to meaningfully complain about, but this is something that gives you that. Secondly, not everyone necessarily has the same things to complain about. So for instance, I'm a person of color, but I'm relatively economically privileged, which means I won't be able to bond with other people and complain about the same things. That means, for instance, that we can't share our complaints and I can't feel heard, which is obviously a very important thing for all students to feel. We unlock those benefits exclusively in our world when we're able to have exams that every student necessarily goes through, which means you get those experiences, and that means you're able to maximize all the things that we told you are really important. So for instance, we get more memes when more people can access this culture of complaint. We have more people to complain to. We have a greater capacity to bomb your lectures and not listen to what you have to say. So that's why then firstly, students need exams because they need to complain. Secondly, students need exams because we need to know how to BS and bluster our way through life. And importantly, I'm not going to give you any structural reasons here because I could just give you an anecdote instead. Earlier this year, I had to moot in front of the Honourable Justice Brayton of the Court of Appeal, and in that, I probably cited 50 cases for my moot. I knew 0 facts of 0 cases, but the way in which I was able to succeed was by having done the selective test in Year 6, which gave me really important rote learning experiences and skills that helped me answer His Honour's questions. And note importantly that we will all be in a position wherein we'll be required to bluster. For instance, blustering remembering when your anniversary is, blustering remember the colour of the eyes of your partner, blustering to your boss why you couldn't finish your task on time, or even recounting where you were last night because your mum called your friend's mum and apparently you weren't at their house, but you also certainly weren't hooking up in the park with your girlfriend whom your family definitely knows exists. So it's clear then that we do need to know how to bluster. They might say, well, you can bluster in other ways. Maybe assessments can help you bluster. Importantly, exams are uniquely way better at helping us bluster, and that's obviously why we need them. Firstly, because you have no time to think, right? Exams, you have to do lots of research, and assessments, you have to do lots of research. It's very difficult. You have no time to think, and that's important for instances when you're put on the spot, like, for instance, in the morning at breakfast when your mum asks you where you were. But secondly, there are obviously, and they might say, well, there are other instances where you have to learn how to lie quickly anyway, so you might be put into those positions, but you need to be able to lie formally. So for instance, if you're in front of Big Pharma and you're working for the not-for-profit organization McKinsey, helping them start the next opioids crisis, you need to be formal about that and be able to lie really effectively about statistics about patients to make their lives better. At the end of the day, exams are incredibly important, and that's why we were so, so proud to affirm.
Well, that was sensational. I feel like giving you another 6 minutes. That was great. Now I know every time I make a bad university policy, I'm actually doing good. Giving people something to complain about. So, thank you for that. And next speaker, moving right along, Professor Lyria Bennett-Moses, who graduated from law 2,000 years ago.
Well, I might just start by saying I'm not sure that the first speaker of the affirmative needs an exam to start blustering. But what the negative will be arguing this today is that maybe universities need exams and maybe lecturers need exams, but students don't need exams. Now, one of the tasks normally of the first speaker of the affirmative is to set up the definition. And one thing that they missed out is, well, what even is an exam? So I'm going to just fill in that little gap. An exam is inauthentic, artificial, time-pressured, high stakes, individualistic, with no external support, where you get one shot to get a good mark. So that is what we're talking about. And thinking about that, I'm going to talk about the harms that exams cause. My second speaker, Professor Richard Buckland, is going to say that exams have no benefits. In other words, they're useless. While our third speaker, Alicia Lawrence, will dazzle you all with her brilliance and summarise. So the first speaker of the affirmative invited me to talk about stress. And I think, it's very easy to sort of blow this away. I want to talk about when I was a student, slightly less than 1,000 years ago, and the stress of exams. This was actually a maths exam, not a law exam. So maybe law was 2,000 years ago, but maths wasn't. And I was sitting in a maths exam, and this was in the days when they let you have 7-hour exams. So this was pretty evil. But I go in there, and I start hyperventilating. Now I've only hyperventilated twice in my life, and the other one was childbirth, which gives you a bit of a sense of how severe this was, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm hyperventilating, my brain goes blank. I was looking at the exam questions, they could have been written in a foreign language. I reckon if you'd asked me what 1 + 1 was, I couldn't have formulated the answer to. My brain was completely blank. It was a really, really high stress, nerve-wracking experience from which I have still not recovered 2,000 years later. But we know that exams have huge problems, create problems for students' mental health, and we can see that in the statistics. We can see that when they talk to us about their experiences going through university. But beyond the issue of stress, exams harm who they become as a person. I don't know if anyone has ever looked at things like the graduate learning outcomes. In preschool, they call this becoming. But part of what educational institutions do is form people, make them into the kinds of people we want. Instead, exams make them competitive, achievement-focused. They don't create the kinds of skills that we put in these graduate outcomes: curiosity, openness to ideas, positive experiences of learning, innovative thinking. They do none of that. When students go into an exam, they tell us what they think will get them a high mark. And that is all, which is really the same thing as saying they tell us what they think we want to hear. Is that the kind of people we want to graduate? Do we want to train the next generation simply to please us? The whole exam is set up, if you like, with the premise that there is an answer or a rubric or a criteria out there. And the goal is essentially to get as close to as many of those things as you can. It's fixed point thinking, right? You don't get high marks through experiment and innovation. You get high marks through going through the monkey circus. Again, is this the kind of student that we want to turn out into the workforce? They drive competition among the cohort. Students see themselves as competing against each other. This isn't collaboration. This isn't working in a team and drawing together. Again, do we want to, can you imagine someone starting a job and you tell them, you can't talk to your manager, you can't talk to your peers, you can't check anything with any other departments here. We want our graduates to be able to work alone in a completely focused, screened-off environment with no assistance at all. Go, do your work. But that's what we're turning out. That's what we're teaching people. Do we want our graduates being that person in the workplace who is just working on their own, focusing on their own achievements? Why are we training them to become something that we don't actually want them to be? Well, there you go. Exams drive stupid answers. I don't know if anyone's marked exams here, but for those of you who have, will know that you look at the exam paper, you're like, I know this student doesn't really think that. Right? We've all got exam answers in our heads in that sort of category. Why do they do it? It's because it's that high pressure. You're not actually getting from the students what they know. You're getting from them what they can put out in that high stakes, high pressure environment. And it's not a true test of their knowledge. We're not only turning them into competitive people with fixed thinking, non-innovative thinkers who try to please the generation above them, we're turning them into cheats. Exams create a moral hazard. It's inevitable that it'll be perceived that, oh, if you cheat, you can get a higher mark. Well, if that's the stake, if the whole goal is performance and marks driven, guess what's going to happen? We're going to create a whole series of cheats. Now, you might think these things are so awful, but maybe we, the professoriate and lecturers of the university, put ourselves in the same position. So, for example, when you apply for professor at the university, they sit you down and say, this is the professor exam. Or when we decide who we want as our new vice-chancellor, right? And I wasn't part of this process, but I can guarantee you it didn't involve putting the candidates in a room and making them sit the vice-chancellor exam. Although I know what the answers on that should have been. What we do with real life, when we're actually looking for quality, when we're really assessing people to work out, are you fit for a particular role? We do it in other ways. We find out other things about them. We actually don't walk the walk. We don't put ourselves in exam rooms to work out who among us are the best. So exams are there because lecturers don't want to think creatively and they don't want to be asked hard questions by all those education committees about what exactly this assessment is. You put an exam, everyone thinks they know it. Universities hold them because they scale. But for students, it's misery, it's compromising who they become, and as my second speaker will explain, it's also a pointless exercise. Thank you.
That was excellent too. I'm thinking the university's been in business for 70 years setting these exams. What have we done? Created these yes men cheats and people with no creativity. It's a tragedy, but, well, we've still got time to decide and mend our ways, and we'll see if we do that with advice from our next speaker, Adi Torta.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. And it saddens me that the first speaker of the negative really spoke about bad exams and about bad students with Merlin and with yourself in the house. That's like virtually heresy, I hate to tell you. But anyway, I'm going to not only refute that, but I'm also going to rebut some of the common assumptions about the stress related to exams with good use of proper data and statistics. But firstly, before I do so, what I'd like to do is talk to you about how, from the perspective of an academic, exams are very student-centred. As you know, we all work in a GO8 university now ranked within the top 50 in the entire world. Yeah. And so every day of every week, we are told to bring our A game, and we do so happily all the time. And despite being slightly fatigued by this time of the year, plus with a bit of COVID, how does that make us feel? What have we done over this year? We have developed resilience, and we're proud of it. Hands up if you don't feel like if you feel like you have developed resilience over 2021. Come on, hands up. See, look at this, a room full of resilient academics. Now turn to the person next to you and give them a clap. Be proud, shout out loud. And this is what some of the living through pressures does for us. We are proud and we're resilient. Do we not want the same for our students? Do we not feel that navigating high stakes exams throughout their programs will help them develop the resilience that they need to be proud of themselves when they come out of university with a beautiful transcript that they can then take into the workforce and be super proud of? Would they be so proud if they had a transcript that said, turned up, attended, had a really nice Teams background? I mean, seriously. So we need these exams to make our students develop those extra skills that they will need in life. We also know that students want these exams and marks. I can speak very intimately from the discussions that we've had in my own faculty where we've discussed, you know, should we review our exam practices? They not only want exams, they want marks, they want high marks. And they take these certifications into the work. In fact, Professor Buckland, paying attention? So I just want to talk about a conversation I had with one of my many children last night who did an exam of yours 2 years ago on cybersecurity. You promised him that if they were able to predict a company that was soon to have a security breach, they would get an extra mark. He still wants that mark. 2 years later, he hasn't let go, despite having a highly successful job in the workforce. He wants you to give that mark to him, please. As well as that, you know, in terms of national certification, exams, marks, they allow our graduates to be benchmarked nationally. Without these marks, we would have a lot of very unemployed doctors, lawyers, engineers, and they really don't want that. People also talk about the impact of exams on student well-being. And although the words, some people cannot be convinced by logic and science, have come into my mind more times than I want to acknowledge over the last 4 months, I'm sure that this audience, that won't be the case. So I'm going to share with you some data that I have about stress units and passage through courses. You can see, sorry about the mic, that if we look at averaging stress units experienced by students throughout a course, and we take a mean, we can plot that if you have less stress throughout a course, maybe you do have that horrible experience of, you know, not being able to breathe and stuff, just for a small period of time, as opposed to high stress throughout the whole course of having to do things and get things in. There's 34 units compared to 37 without exams. When we look at academics, stress is even bigger separation of the curve. Academics just have to write the exam and mark the exam, as opposed to rolling assessments constantly having to be delivered and marked throughout. Sure, n equals 4 for the first study, which was just my children and only one, but that is more evidence than we have for ivermectin and COVID, and I'm sure this is already being tweeted around the world as good, forceful evidence. So before I finish, I just want you all to come with me on a thought experiment. And this thought experiment involves Professor Crosley in his kitchen cutting mushrooms, because he's been thinking deeply about climate change, and he's been thinking about whether he should become a vegan. So he's been thinking about that, but tonight he's not thinking about that. Tonight he's thinking about a Vita, and he's thinking about whether love or work would be enough. And he thinks no. He thinks that community, and he thinks that purpose are always also needed. And he's thinking so hard that, bam, he slices through his Athena eminence. And there's blood pouring everywhere, and he's very distressed, so he gets the dishcloth, puts it on, and luckily he has a family member to rapidly take him to hospital, and there he sees the emergency doctor. And I want you to consider 2 scenarios. The first one, the emergency doctor comes in, he goes, "Mate, you made a real mess of it." And he goes, "Looks really bad. I'm going to try and sew it up, but you know what? Anatomy was really hard. I didn't really care for it, so I don't really know too much about it. I'll do my best, but hopefully you'll be able to continue to pump out those articles for the conversation just using your elbow on the space bar." Or the second scenario, comes in the emergency doctor, plods around and goes, "Mess, you made a real mess of this." But he goes, "Look, you've just sliced clean through your abductor pollicis brevis. And guess what? Not only can I suture that perfectly, but I know where the arteries are, I know where the nerves are, because guess what? I passed my anatomy exam." Which graduate do you want? Thank you.
Thank you so much, AD, for making it personal. It's always a very effective thing. You also managed to squeeze in the fact that UNSW is a top 50 university with it. We're not meant to care about the rankings, and I think we care too much. But and you're doing so well with that no pain, no gain argument. I don't think it's the right thing to do, but with your son predicting there'd be a security break-in at a firm, he wasn't responsible, was he? We'll leave that there. And we'll invite the next speaker, the second speaker for the negative, Richard Buckland. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I should say just before I start, so please don't start, that was literally the condition. You had to predict it and have no actual action in it. And I'm pretty sure it was an ice cream, not a mark. But yeah, I'm very impressed. Hello, everyone. So let's see where we're up to at the moment. I have a graph that we researched on the internet. Exams and stupid. And you'll see from this graph that exams are stupid. We've all been students. Our first speaker, admittedly, is a second-year student, and that is more studenting than a first-year student, but I've been a student for about 1 million years, and Lyria has too. And not only that, everyone here who's a parent will know when your children are students, you're a student all over again. It's awful. And in a sort of Christ-like way, when my own students at uni sit exams, I feel I'm suffering through the exams with them. I've suffered through more exams than anyone should ever suffer. I do like this argument, and I think it's your strongest, that the main benefit of exams is for students to have something to complain about. But that's my job as a lecturer. Why just exams? What about trimesters? What about the light snail? What about special considerations? What about my lack of lecture notes? There are many things. We are trained and specialised to give you things to complain about. And in terms of blustering, I do think it's an important workplace skill. I love that. But I prefer my students to get blustering live. I think sitting down blustering, it's a second-hand experience. I'd rather them come up to me and tell me why they need an extension. I'd rather them present a piece of work or lie to a boss for a project or something like that. I think the written thing is only a second-hand experience. Now, we did look at the issue of, is there a problem talking about students being bad? Is that somehow against university policy or just a bit on the nose? No. We know that's why we have exams, because we know that the students are lying cheats. And so they need to be invigilated with cameras on, and we need to check and monitor them because we can't trust them. They are bad to the bone. I feel slightly uncomfortable even leaving my car keys on the table as I've walked away from my second speaker. Now, we've also heard this concept of resilience. And again, resilience is good, and having to endure exams does give you resilience. But I like giving my students resilience in different ways. I find that, well, my first job before I was an academic was I was a match tester in a factory. And sure, I tested all the matches before they went out, but they weren't much good. The idea of destructive testing, as I see of exam resilience, is not really a scalable one. So instead, I'd suggest something else. Instead of exams, what we now do in cybersecurity, because we want the students to have particular skills, is they go into the exam room, and I realize this is an argument in favor of exams, and I just shut and lock all the doors, and we turn the taps on in the bathroom. They have to get out before the room floods. It's an authentic assessment. You can't memorize or cheat, and they have to collaborate. I prefer that much more to a traditional exam. But let me now race on to my points super quick, because I can see we're losing time. I have such an optimistic number of things to say. First of all, now speaking at super student speed, exams are terrible at giving students what they need. If they're effective, we'd use them, as my first speaker said, in our own lives, rather than imposing them on our students. So for example, I was thinking, what's a meaningful use of an exam? When in my own life would I ever contemplate using an exam to solve a problem? I couldn't think of a single time. In picking a life partner, in selecting a friend, in deciding what career to do, all the important choices, would sitting down and memorizing something and writing it on a piece of paper help me? Or would I actually rather do it or test it or consult or talk to other people? The HSC, the biggest exam in our life, in a sense, when is it talked about after the first or second week? If it was important, surely we'd keep referring to it. The students don't need that exam. The uni needs that exam. We use it to let students get into uni. It's a very convenient and cheap way of us having students in and not getting too many complaints to the ones we don't let in. It doesn't help any individual students at all. Is there a single student here who remembers happily and confidently looking back at their time doing the HSC and is so proud of the mark they got and it made them a better person? I don't think so, unless anyone here went to Skeggs, as my illustrious... Yes! We are in. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you a quick story in the remaining short bit of time. Universities are interesting places. A typical degree costs $20,000 to $55,000 that the student pays. That's the cost to them. What do we do with that money? Well, we spend $10,000 or less on educating the student, the thing they've paid the money for. What happens to the remainder? Well, and this is a secret and it can't leave this room, we turn it into small gold coins. We have a money bin under the research office and the researchers just go there and swim every day. It's fantastic. I've never been there because I'm a teacher, but the university's fee for no service, hey, let's not hear that phrase here. So the idea is if I set an exam for a student, it costs between $5 and $10 per student. If I give them an authentic assessment that actually measures how they go and helps them and doesn't destructively test them, it costs $80 to $100 per student. They're only paying $55,000, I'd rather charge them $5 a student. That's a deep end to the swimming pool that we can have. That's really lovely. Now, super quick, moving on. Do exams help student learn? I would claim no. Exams test short-term memory, high stakes, solo performance, and they please someone. What job, what life is that preparing you for? The only job I can think of was a sycophant to a dictator. Someone who wants you to please them by saying what they want to hear and has no creativity or upside, and it's very, very stressful, and any time you could be killed. We use the exams to force people to study. We force them to work. But I rather students learn to study. I rather students work. I rather they learn because they want to. How do we learn surfing? How do we learn skateboarding? How do we learn to play a musical instrument? If someone's forcing us, we don't. We do it because we love it. And just moving on super fast through all my points that I'll never get to now, but gee, they were good. Thank you. We don't need exams. Big exam needs exams. Look at my opponents here. They're all lawyers and doctors. Alex is a lawyer and a doctor. Why do they like exams? Well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? Who likes exams? The ones that are good at it. They got here because that's their thing. I think that's why unis do it. We select people who like exams. We're all people who like exams. We give it to our children. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Richard. How did you construct such an argument from those random bits of paper?
I was going to construct a swan.
I often think that Richard is more a student than our students. And you can tell whether someone's a student by how fast they speak. It is true. You can tell people's age by that. But your argument, which was remarkable, was that actually we could save money by not having exams. As a university administrator, I find that a very compelling argument. But before I go on with that, I introduce Dr. Alex Steele.
Thank you, everyone. This was a sort of a really organised debate, and then Richard arrived, and I've completely lost any train of thought that I had. And I think Richard did too, and there was an awful lot of, an enormous amount of really exciting stuff. But can I just point out that Aman, as our first speaker, the only student doing exams recently, got everything done in 6 minutes, spoke faster, was organised and prepared and nailed it. And that's what exams do for you. As opposed to Richard, fantastic, all over the place, no idea, it sounded great, but could you build something with it? It's a bit unclear. So that's one of the really key things that we keep talking about with exams. With an exam, you've got a point where you have to actually produce something. Now, you may be, as Aman is saying, be bullshitting your whole way through it, but you can con a Supreme Court judge by doing that, and that's a massive achievement, as opposed to a wonderful sort of dinner party story. So one of the key things that's really important about exams is that focus, the focus that it gives you. And I think it's been clear from the way we've presented our case that we've got focus and we know what we're doing. So one of the really important things that Richard raised, and I'm going to do this in reverse order because there's a lot more substance in what Lyria said, so I'll just sort of deal with Richard's first, is that Richard was saying, what's the point of exams? What do they do? Can you remember anything since that you did in an exam? Well, there's a couple of really key, I hate to say this, pedagogical theories around learning, and one of the really big ones is something called a testing effect. And the notion is that if you are given a point of stress around your learning, something to make you actually take it seriously, you retain it for longer. So the stuff that you actually studied for in an exam, if you prepared properly as opposed to cramming the night before, which is a point I'll get to in a minute, if you actually prepared properly for an exam, it will stay with you much longer than if you just did it as some sort of group exercise with the ticker box multiple choice thing. So exams, if done well, can actually help to cement knowledge. So there are actually really good reasons for exams. But then to sort of move on to the substance of the negatives case, which really came out of what Lyria was saying, as Adie's already said, everything that Lyria was really talking about was a catalogue of appalling exams, really badly designed exams. I mean, this is the Education Festival. This is the highlight of the Education Festival, where we're talking about really good teaching and learning, and where we're saying, how can we actually build this up to something that is worthy of a top 50 university. And we would never send our students into exams that are too hard for them, for which they're not properly prepared, for which they're not scaffolded. Well, surely we wouldn't be doing that. Surely we wouldn't be stressing our students in such a way, because we're a top 50 university. Have I said that twice now? The really significant issue here really is let's get rid of bad exams. We will all stand up and put our hands on our hearts and say, we hate bad exams. But there are good exams. And there are some exams that are important and are necessary. And those exams relate to competence. The fact that you trust your doctor to be able to do a suture for you. The fact that you have this little piece of plastic which says, I'm almost able to drive a car on a road. So somebody made me drive a car under controlled circumstances and said, yeah, actually, you're probably okay. It's that sort of testing, that sort of exam that we need. Yeah, there's a whole lot of exams we don't need. Let's face it. Completely agree with Lyria. There are a whole lot of lazy practices in universities where you don't need a traditional old-fashioned lock you in the toilet, switch on all the taps and see who gets out alive approach to exams. But you can have an approach to exams where you support the students through their learning process in a formative way, and at the end, you give them an achievement. You say, we supported you all the way up to this, you're going to go into this exam, you are going to knock this out of the park, and surprise, surprise, you all got HDs. And we don't care about bell curves, we don't care about dragging you down. We're going to actually say, we set an exam that's as hard as anywhere else, and all of our students got HDs because we taught them so well, and they engaged so well, and they learnt really, really well. And that then becomes a celebration. So the exam is not a negative thing, it's a wonderful, positive thing. And that's how you build resilience. That's how you avoid these sort of hyperventilating issues in students' lives when they hit something they're not ready for. And I think, this is probably summed up incredibly well by what Lyria said when she said that the only other time that had happened to her was in childbirth. And I think that's a really nice analogy. Exams are like childbirth. They're not fun, necessarily, but they are the most amazing things in human experience. So, and look, and the other thing that's really interesting, the thing about childbirth, so I'm told, is that the brain helps you to forget. So the pain is there at the time, but you forget because you look at your children and you love your children and you think, this is so amazing. So this is exams. You go, God, I hated that exam, but look at this degree, isn't it amazing? And look at this grade I got, isn't it amazing? And I'm going to chase Richard Buckland for that extra mark because it's so important to him. So if I could push another analogy, we shouldn't be throwing the baby out with the baby out with the baby, or the bathwater out with the bathwater, and we should work out which is which. Just to summarise, Aman made the really important point that students need exams because they need things to complain about. They need to learn to bullshit, and they need to learn to cope with when things don't go the way they want. Exams give you that structured way to build resilience. And as Adi said, this building of resilience is really important, and we can't send people out into the world where, if you have a client meeting and you've got a crisis, it's very unlikely that somebody is going to say to you as a graduate, look, here's the really important issue that we need advice on. Could you get back to us in 4 weeks with a research paper? Or the bridge is falling down, could you think about a hypothetical way that we could maybe fix it and get it back to me in 2 weeks after you discuss with 6 people who we've put you into a random group. No, there's going to be these moments where you just have to do things, you just have to perform, and that's what our exams are helping our students to be able to do. Thank you.
Gosh, I thought for a moment we were wandering into a serious bit at the end there, Alex. It seemed like we did, but I was glad you got the top 50 universities in. I also saw for the first time the lawyer side of you when you said about Richard's talk. Could you build something on Richard's talk? It's a bit unclear. This damning with faint praise. And I also loved the bit where you said, conning a High Court judge is important. It's very good. But anyway, I think we've got now finale of what I think's just been described as the highlight of the Education Festival. To all the other people involved, I thought there were many highlights. But over to our final speaker, Alicia Lawrence. Thank you.
Hi. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Side affirmatives examples are really good. If you're a nerd like Aman, or whoever is on the opposition, or even my team, I know the chats after are going to be really, really awkward now. Aman passed the selective school test. I didn't, but I'm not bitter, like I'm saying this in a room, like, you know, probably with 100 people in it. The only reason that I have not failed my degree yet is literally because COVID happened and they let me do an exam over 48 hours rather than 2. I don't know how anybody ever did that in 2 hours. I think I would literally go into cardiac arrest, and I'm a 19-year-old that exercises maybe once a week. I think in this debate, we clearly proved that exams are not needed by students. Aman wants to tell us that we just need to prove that exams, you know, we need them in some way, even if that's to complain about them. So I guess if we prove the inverse, we also win. Couple of things I'm going to do in this speech: talk about the academic impact, and then I'm going to talk about the impact on students. Firstly, on the academic impact, what do we hear from side opposition? Side opposition tells us that, well, it's really easy for academics to put together a paper, and this is a really good thing. Obviously, this is not like on the debate topic about whether or not it's good for students, but then they give us a fabulous example of the anatomy exam. Okay, I have a friend that literally does medicine and has a 60 wham. Imagine if that were the odds when you went into any surgery you did. You would never do it again, right? You'd probably come out of there with an arm. Maybe you wouldn't have an appendix, right? I think that that is probably a huge harm. Obviously, you'd rather somebody that was like able to look at their exam and look at where the appendix is. Maybe if you're in your third year of medicine, that's pretty sad, but it's probably something we can claim that they can do on our side. Next, but what do we actually tell you? We tell you that people give really, really dumb answers for their exams. This week, I literally told a student of mine who takes environmental science to dumb down your answer and give a worse answer than you think you should for the HSC environmental science paper, because some of the answers on that paper are literally that bad. Secondly, we tell you that this teaches people to be solitary. I love my friends, but I literally could not stand to see any of those people the week of exams, because I literally feel so bloodthirsty when I know that I need to get a better exam mark than them on the bell curve. I try to convince myself my friends are dumb. Maybe I might actually trick them next time in the exam into thinking they don't know anything about torts. And lastly, you probably just wanted to cheat, right? I think that the majority of students, if they knew that they couldn't get caught cheating, were probably going to do it, and this is so much more likely when you put the stress on them of exams. At the end of this issue, in terms of academic impact, this term, I was like this likely and this close to telling my torts examiner or my torts lecturer that a tort is a nice, yummy, tasty pastry. And I think that if I didn't have that 72-hour-long exam, that was pretty much an assignment that would have happened anyway. Next, as to the impact on students. I just made a cute little graph because I thought that that was what we were doing in this debate. And this is the amount of university exams I've done compared to my WAM. It's not looking good, everybody. Like a couple more terms, and it's, you know, this doesn't even start at 100. I don't think the WAM starts at 100 anyway. So it's going pretty not good for me. So let's keep going. What is the impact on students? We tell you that it's literally comparable to childbirth. Neg says this was good. Neg said this was, affirmative says this is good. At the end of this debate and at the end of an exam that you do, in one situation, you get a beautiful child that may or may not pass the selective school exam, depending if you're Aman's mum or mine. But literally, what do you get at the end of side affirmatives debate? You probably get my torts mark, which I don't think anybody would actually want their lawyer to have. So I think that at the end of this, we probably prove that whatever you get out of an exam is probably less good than you get out of childbirth. Maybe not if you're my mum, but it's probably the same anyway. Next, on what we tell you. Side affirmative tells us that, you know, you get extra good skills and that you're not actually going to talk about your amazing Zoom background. Okay, firstly, my Zoom background is really good. The UNSW Zoom backgrounds are literally the campus. How beautiful. I haven't been here in literally years. And secondly, my media teachers tell me that there's literally marks for things like turning on your Zoom camera when they ask you if you want when they ask your media teachers whether or not you turned your camera on. So that is probably a good thing anyway. Secondly, they tell us that students just like to whinge. Aman has met me, he knows I can whinge about literally anything. I think that that is something students will be able to do either way. Secondly, they tell us that we get memes. I think because I do a media course, I know all about memes. Literally any media tutor creates like 5 million memes and calls it a day on the lecture slideshow. We get plenty of memes on our side. But lastly, they tell us that people learn to lie. I love lying. You can't even tell if I've been lying this entire speech, and I think that proves how good I am. So I think that we can probably lie on either side. So what do we tell you at the end of this? We tell you that people do stupid answers on exams, but also they're a moral hazard because they're likely to cheat if they want to. Secondly, it's not that you don't do exams outside of school. Last, we just have really good alternatives. And fourthly, I think we get more gold coins from the researchers, and I feel pretty bad for them because I'm not reading anything they do. So they deserve all of the gold coins. At the end of this debate, what do we think? I think that firstly, we've proven that exams are good for nerds, which is a very, very small percentage of people in the population, but moreover people who actually go to the university. Secondly, we get just less cheating. Thirdly, I'm nicer to my friends and I actually get to keep some of them at the end of my degree. And lastly, exams put students in high pressure situations that are particularly not needed in light of other examples and other things that we have, such as main assessment tasks that we're already doing at uni. At the end of this debate, because I have proven that people are like just not likely to actually listen on these exams, but also that I'm going to have a really, really rough time talking to Lyria after this, after I was assigned a reading of hers that I never ever did, I'm so, so proud to oppose.
That was perfect. You're the only person who was perfectly timed for a start. I've always wondered what a tort is, Alicia. I have no idea. You had the best graph. And like most of our speakers, you managed to mention childbirth. It's quite unusual, but that was... and I did think there's a very strong argument about there are other possible things to whinge about. Yeah, it's quite, the logic there was good. Also, like most of our students in law, you talked about moral hazards, but also your skill at lying. And you also talked about gold coins. So it's fantastic. We've reached the stage where we need the audience to vote with the clapometer. So what we'll do is I'll say all those for the affirmative, and then we'll have some clapping, and then I'll say all those for the negative, and we'll have some clapping. And then my ears, I'm going to listen to with my right ear and my left, and through that scientific method, Richard will draw a graph of it. So I think my microphone's been turned off on purpose. Anyway, so all those who want to clap for the affirmative team, clap now. And all those who want to clap for the negative team, clap now. Okay, so I have to, you can tell that it's line ball, but I'm going to award this debate to the team that had the arguments which were the most ridiculous. It's the affirmative. But it really was a super debate. I do thank everyone. I'm glad that we've got such students, and we'll try to get some better academics. That was magnificent. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for organising it.
Exam, we can make sure that happens.
There is a Vice-Chancellor exam. So we have 5 minutes to rearrange the stage for presentations, and I've just got to answer a phone call.
Fantastic, you guys. That was so, the things
Welcome back, everyone. I think you'll have to agree with me that that debate was one of the highlights of what's been a fantastic week of the Education Festival. And what we'd like to do now is to finish with honouring and acknowledging our wonderful colleagues and all that they have done for us. So this will be the Teaching Awards ceremony. We'll be looking at those who've won the National Australian University Teaching Awards, our UNSW Awards for Teaching, the Vice-Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Teaching, a new category, the Students' Choice Award, and we'll tell you more about that when that comes up. And we're also going to recognise those who have acquired and earned Advanced HE Fellowship status and our peer reviewers. So first of all, I would like to thank, behind the scenes, a lot of work happens, you know, for all these awards. And so I would like to thank Kristen Turnbull, Anna Rowe, Edith So, Bianca Azar, Alex Bannigan, and our student group ARC, who have all worked very hard behind the scenes to bring these awards together. So please join me in thanking them. And also our Associate and Deputy Deans of Education, and I see some here in the room today who do a lot of work within the faculties to help bring those awards to fruition. So thank you to all of them. I'm now going to invite Professor Merlin Crossley, our Deputy Vice-Chancellor, to introduce the session with a few remarks before we call the awardees to the stage. Thank you, Merlin.
Thank you very much, Louise. So it's great to see everyone here, and welcome again to everyone who's online. The awards are enormously important. They help us. So many people are doing brilliant things and good things in their jobs in teaching every day and working with students and changing and transforming lives. But we want to recognize some of those activities, and ideally the very best of those activities, so that we can share that best practice, so that we can build the community, so we can celebrate and thank people for doing their great things. Teaching awards are very complicated in that historically there's been extensive application processes, and we try to have processes which have feedback from all sorts of different people, be they students, be they heads of school, be they fellow teachers, to try to pull out the best examples that can serve to inspire us all and to recognize the people. And what I like about these awards, and I look around the room now, I'm beginning to get to know more people in the community on the basis of the work they do in teaching. So, you know, today, Peter Heslin's 2-minute video tips, I watched 30 of those. There were more than 130, but I watched 30 that were shortlisted. And some people I already knew, and other people I felt I got to know just by the 2-minute video. And this is terrific. And often the people who win awards will go on to, they'll win perhaps one award, and then they go on to win other awards, and then people go on to win national awards. And those people will become known in this university and in other universities. And our education-focused community is also becoming well known in the management of this university. The council of this university is very aware and very supportive of it, and other universities are aware of this community. And the more we can help each other and support each other and share the good ideas and build on them and discard the bad ideas like those ones in the debate this afternoon, the stronger our community will become. So it's terrific to be here to celebrate with all the people who are winning awards, and also to thank the people who've run the process. We've been really working hard to try to keep evolving this process, and I thank the people in Rawdon's team, and particularly Louise Lutzman, for organising all the awards today, and I congratulate all the winners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Merlin, and thank you for those inspiring words about teaching practice. The first category of awards that we have are the national awards. These are the Australian awards for university teaching, and they bring with them, as you can imagine, quite a great deal of prestige. And the very first award is for Professor Adrian Torda. I should tell you I use that term rightly so. Congratulations, Professor Torda. Please wait here for a photo. The next award is for Dr. Lynn Gribble, who from the School of Business, well actually the UNSW Business School and School of Management and Governance. Congratulations, Lynn. And the next award is for Dr. David Kellerman from the School of Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering from the Faculty of Engineering. Congratulations, David. We're now going to have a group shot. Where? There we go. With Mel. Thank you. Well, and the next category awards are for the UNSW Awards for Teaching. And the first awardee here is for Associate Professor Christopher Mickelson from the School of Global and Public Law in the Faculty of Law. And this is for the Vice Chancellor's Award for Sustained Excellence in Teaching. This is a new award this year, and it recognises someone's contribution to teaching over many, many years. And he's not here today. Oh, then we award it to him in absentia. Next, we would like the Vice Chancellor's Award for Teaching Excellence in the general category, which is for excellence in teaching across myriads of courses, and this goes to Dr. Nicholas Apo-Ephus. Congratulations, Nicholas. And the next award is the Vice Chancellor's Award for Teaching Excellence in the Early Career category, and it's with great pleasure that I announce it goes to Dr. Arash Katamian Anfa, and he's going to forgive me for that, I hope, from the Faculty of Engineering. Thank you. The next award is the Vice Chancellor's Award for Outstanding Contributions to Student Learning, general category, and this goes to Dr. Vinod Masendupalli, and he is from the School of Optometry and Vision Science, now in the Faculty of Medicine. Congratulations. The next award is the Vice Chancellor's Award for Outstanding Contributions to Student Learning, general category, and this goes to Associate Professor Terry Ord from the School of Bees in the Faculty of Science, and unfortunately he can't be with us today. He is watching online, so congratulations, Terry. We are very proud for you. The next award is Vice Chancellor's Award for Outstanding Contributions to Student Learning, and this goes to Associate Professor Ang Lu from the School of Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering in the Faculty of Engineering, and he also is watching from online, so congratulations to him. The next award is in the early career category, and this is for Vice Chancellor's Award for Outstanding Contributions to Student Learning, and this goes to Dr. Melanie Fentoulis from the Office of Medical Education and the Faculty of Medicine and Health. The next award is for the Vice Chancellor's Award for Outstanding Contributions to Student Learning in the Sessional Staff category, and this goes to Dr. Lana Lai from the School of Babs in the Faculty of Science. And the next award is the Vice Chancellor's Award for Outstanding Contributions to Student Wellbeing. Again, this is a new category that we introduced this year in recognition of the importance of ensuring student wellbeing in their learning journeys. And we with great pride to award this to Dr. Thomas Britz from the School of Maths and Stats in the Faculty of Science. And we're now going to pause for a group photo. Yes. Now, Merlin, we have the Vice Chancellor's Award for Programs that Enhance Learning. And this is in the Educational Partnerships and Collaboration category. And this is for the Master of Teaching Indigenous Education Immersion Programs. And this award goes to Rosa Maz, Catherine Thompson, Auntie Maxine Ryan, Josephine Holek-Jack, and the Eastern Suburbs Local Aboriginal Education Consultative Group. And they are also from the School of Education in the Faculty of ADA. That's unfortunate, but we still, we do indeed. Yes, and we will record it. Congratulations. There's money. I want money. The next award is for, again, for programs that enhance learning, and this is for innovation in curriculum design and innovative pedagogical practice. And this is to the Bachelor of Commerce redesign team. And it's wonderful to see them here if they'd like to come and join us on stage. Christine Matthews, Tam Nguyen, Janice Wardrop, Josh Keller, Heather Crawford, Courtney Wright, Scott French, Michael Katz, Sandeep Kopalani, Kevin Liu, Connor Clune, Catherine Collins, Thomas Roof, and Sam Krishna. So what I'd like to say is, you are the best example of teamwork I have seen amongst a group of academics ever. It's wonderful to see. Congratulations. You're going to have to hustle over. We want you all on stage.
And then we have to huddle up.
Do you want them in 2 rows?
2 rows.
Could those who identify as short please step forward? No. Identify. There we go. Wow. You've reduced the Deputy Vice Chancellor to being on his knees. Very impressive. Now we need to ask, yes, indeed. Teeny's back. Deputy Vice-Chancellor. Now I'd like you to give the award for the Heinz-Hurrence Award for Teaching Innovation to Associate Professor Christine Matthews from the UNSW Business School.
Hello everyone, my name is Jonathan Morris. I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor of Research Training and Entrepreneurship and the Dean of Graduate Research, and it's my pleasure to announce the winners for the Vice Chancellor's Awards for high degree research. So we have 4 categories today. High degree researchers are a critical part of this university, and as many of you know, of course, you need great supervision and great academic leadership to help support these candidates. So the 4 people today are really outstanding examples of the quality supervision that we have at UNSW. So, the first award is to Associate Professor Belinda Ferrari for the High Degree Research Supervision from the Faculty of Science. Okay, so the second award is the Emerging Supervision Award, and that has been given to Associate Professor Ziv Hamari from the School of Photovoltaic and Renewable Energy Engineering, the Faculty of Engineering. So he's not here today, so anyway, congratulations. Our third category is the Vice Chancellor's Award for Excellence for High Degree Research Leadership, and this is to Associate Professor Maria McCauley from the School of Optometry and Vision Science, formerly the Faculty of Science, now the Faculty of Medicine. Congratulations. I also think she's not here today. So. And then finally is the Vice Chancellor's Award for Excellence for Promoting Industry Engagement in High Degree Research. This has been awarded to Scientific Professor Justin Gooding from the School of Chemistry, the Faculty of Science. He unfortunately can't make it today either. Please congratulate him.
We have now a wonderful new category of awards, university-wide awards, that have been initiated by Alex Bannigan and our team. And this is, and with the full collaboration of the Students' Arts Society, and this is where students were asked simply to write about an academic who they felt had made a difference in their learning journey, in their education, or their well-being. So these were judged by the students, they were nominated by the students, judged by the students, and we're so very proud. If you could hear what these students wrote about the academics you're about to recognise, you'd understand why they have been selected. And we do have videos of those students talking about this. So Merlin, I'm very, very proud to present to you the Students' Choice for the very best teachers. And the first one goes to Mark Chi from the School of Computer Science and Engineering and the Faculty of Engineering. Without the tongue. Thank you. And the next one goes to, just wait here, we'll do it. The next one goes to Dr. John Napier from the School of Arts and Media and the Faculty of Arts, Design and Architecture. Congratulations, John. Congratulations. And our next award goes to Dr. Theron Schmidt, and he'll forgive me if I didn't say that quite correctly. And he's from the School of Arts and Media as well, and the Faculty of Arts, Design and Architecture. Congratulations, Theron. And the next award goes to Dr. Lisa Sidhu from the School of Science at UNSW Canberra. And sadly, Lisa can't be with us today, but I know she's joining us online. Congratulations, Lisa. And the next award is to Nick Jordan, who is one of our wonderful professional staff, who is the publications coordinator at ARC, and who has been highly recommended by our students for the support he gives them. Congratulations, Nick. Would you like to just come back and join the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for a group photo? And congratulations. What we have now is we would like to recognise those who have achieved fellowship of the Advanced HE Academy in the United Kingdom, which is international recognition of teaching expertise. And I'll invite Merlin to say a few words about this if he would like to.
Yeah, so this is very important. There's international recognition is an enormously important thing for communities, for people's careers, for universities. And some time ago, it was called the Higher Education UK. It's now Advanced AG, Advanced Higher Education. There are 150,000 fellows in 100 different countries. And we have a system where people can go through the full program and become associate fellows of the society, and we have 46 of those. And then we have the higher level fellows, which there are 18. And this has been going for a number of years, and the university is very well organised about this. And I think it has a number of important points to it. One is that by going through the fellowship process, either the full program or the direct application program, it helps people to develop their thinking about their teaching and the student experience and the way they support students. And people learn things from the program, so develop those skills, which is important. Also, the way we do it, it brings people together. And again, I think this is one of the best things that UNSW is doing, that people from across the university in different disciplines come together to work on a task. And then the third thing is the strangest thing, that it gives people a line to put on their CV. And it's tempting to sort of be cynical about that and say, you know, another line on the CV. But these things are important. On people's CV, it signals to the world that you take your teaching seriously, you take the professionalism of your teaching seriously, and you've dedicated your time to that cause, and you've reached a particular standard. So I'm very glad that we do these things. I don't like these things to be the be-all and end-all, because our actual job of teaching students, looking after them and looking after each other is what really counts. And lines on your CV shouldn't be what it's all about, as we learned in the debate. It shouldn't be all about getting marks. But the two things go hand in hand, and if we can keep them in balance, it strengthens our community. And I like the fellowships of advanced higher education, because it gives recognition to people who dedicate their lives to teaching. And it's interesting, a number of my colleagues put it on their email signature. And I think that that's a good thing as well. And I think it's interesting, and on social media, I also see people use their various titles on their Twitter handle or in their little blurb about them. And again, it's a way of signaling to the sort of things you value and care about. So I really am delighted that we do so well. I thank the people who who helped develop the program. I mean, Marina Harvey helped for a while, and now Louise has taken over this staff development sort of aspect and is working to develop further with people like Alex Bannigan, and Richard Buckland's helping us, because we want to keep developing this space. I think the professional development is going to become increasingly important, not just for the professionalism and skills of teaching staff, but also for the communities of staff we have here. So I'm really delighted to congratulate the fellows today, and I think their names on the slides, and I don't think I'm allowed to shake hands with any of them, but perhaps we can applause.
Thank you, Merlin. So on the preceding slide, we even have people reaching Principal Fellowship of the HEA, which is a highly prestigious role, and you need to show impact across the institution and nationally. We have senior fellows, some of who I'm very proud to see are here with us right now, which is just wonderful, and our fellows, and then who are also here, some of whom are also here with us. And then through the full program, we also have, and on Gather Town, so thank you to Rhoda's reminding me, we have some of our wonderful fellows joining us. So congratulations to them too. Just wonderful. And then those who've become associate fellows via their participation in the full program and their adoption of that process. The other thing we'd like to do right now is to thank also those who participated in the summative peer review process, which is a process where we want to have people reflect on their teaching practice, but it is a task that involves a lot of work for those who step up to be reviewers for us. It takes many hours to do any one of these reviews, and what I'd like to acknowledge are we have many who have done it, but we would also like to thank those who have done many. So we've listed just here those who've done 5 or more in the last year. And I can assure you each review takes a minimum of between 3 and 4 hours to do. So we would like to thank those, Isabella who's done 9, Anna who's here who's done 6, Richard Vickery, Socrates, and our wonderful colleagues here who have done more than 5 or more, and also those who stepped up under what were sometimes quite challenging and awkward situations, and their names are listed here. Please join me in acknowledging their hard work. And now we have, as is traditional, give it to Merlin. Where Merlin has been passed the envelope, please. And as you know, in Gathertown, we've had posters all this week that people can look at, and people have been given the opportunity to vote for the poster that they thought made the greatest impact on them. And Merlin is now going to announce the awards for us. There are 2 awards.
Very exciting. I hope I've been handed the right envelope, because I realise that occasionally, but looking at the names, I know that this is the right envelope. So there's 2 award winners. One is, poster is entitled Empowering Students with Wellbeing and Resilience Skills and Strategies by Amanda Carlin and Olivia Tunks. Yeah. So you may be somewhere else, so, but congratulations. And the next one is June Kim, a virtual cuppa and catch-up in Gathertown. So I think that's the end.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say a couple more thank yous, and I'm going to ask you if you'd mind wrapping up, which is great. Just before we wrap up, Nola's going to say a few words to bring this whole wonderful week to a close. I'd like to remind you that the Faculty of Law conference goes on tomorrow for anyone who might like to still join them. This is not the final. But what I would really like to do is I would like to thank all the behind-the-scenes staff who made this possible and have worked so very hard to make this festival possible. So I'd like to thank the faculty leads, without whom we could not have put this together. This was a new idea, and trust me, they have worked very, very hard to provide engaging, innovative and interactive sessions. So please join me in thanking them. And then I have to give sincere and heartfelt thanks to our wonderful PVCE SE team. And they are Alex Flanagan, whose concept this was, and our wonderful engagement team, Dorota, Bonnie, Remy, Elise, and Yvonne. They are here, they are in the room around, they are. We're also acknowledging, as they do in the theatre, Yvonne is sitting up in the prompt box making faces at me. Thank you. I would also like to thank the AV team who have been doing an amazing job. You've seen them patiently taking our photographs, getting people to stand on the white X, getting the screens to all work so superbly, filming us. And I'd like to thank Christine Lee from Dee's Creative Services for all our visual branding and assets. Trust me, these brilliant colours were her hard work. The hospitality team, including Darka, Dan, Nick, Lisa, and all their support teams in bringing all of us together and making this work so seamlessly. As you know, whenever it looks like it was easy and seamless, someone has worked incredibly hard behind the scenes so that it looks effortless. So one last thank you to them, and then I'll hand over to Mela. Thank you. And Mela's just going to wrap up for us.
Thanks very much, Louise. So, first of all, I just want to say something about that peer review of teaching and to thank the people who've done it. So, it's really interesting, and this day and this conference, this isn't the beginning and the end, but this is the end of the beginning of the revolution of education at UNSW, I think. When I started in the role of DVC academic, all we had, it wasn't all we had, but what we did have was cat-eye scores from students. And we were really aware that the student voice was important. We wanted to listen to it, but we didn't want it to be the only thing. So we introduced peer review of teaching and summative peer review of teaching very rapidly, because everything was done rapidly those days. And I want to thank all the people who've worked on it, because I think it was important that we recognized that we were attempting to get peer recognition into the system. But I don't think we got it right in the first iteration, and we made it compulsory for promotion in order to signify that we took it really seriously and we wanted it to be important. And so many people stepped up and did this, and because we made it compulsory, we then got into a pickle that we had to do it for people who are doing promotions, and this was hard, particularly in the days of COVID, but we didn't want to relax the rules because we didn't want to signal that we didn't care about this sort of thing. But I think we've got loads of work to do on that. I'm really grateful. It's really nice for me actually to see the names of the people who were just voluntarily doing this, and I know that not everyone's name was there. But I think it's really great for me to see that. It's great for me to see other people's names of the people who work behind the scenes. It's great for me to see all the award winners and gradually get to know more and more of people, and for you all to get to know each other, the people who are doing different things in different ways to improve student learning so that all our students get HDs, as Alex said previously, and improve student support. As the challenges of education unfold and we have students for diverse backgrounds, and I know many, many of you work so hard to make sure that all students feel supported and included. I think as technology advances, we're going to have to help each other more. It is never about the technology, it's always about the people, but the technology allows you to work with other people, connect with them, and at UNSW, we have people who are brilliant at adapting the technologies for different purposes, and that's why I really like Peter Heslin's 2-minute tips, because watching a 2-minute video is quite fun, and it's a great way of meeting someone. And that's what Emma Jane said in her 2-minute video, that you meet someone by these short videos, and I think that that's critical to our community. So look, this has been a terrific day. We've had 650 people in the Teams Hub, which is great. In the past, we've had about 400 people in these events. We've had 150 people here today physically, and I think we're trying to celebrate and share good practice and make good teaching and people who work hard with teaching more visible and more influential in the life of the university and the management of the university. We're trying to work out what things to do next. And I think that we have a couple of really important advantages at UNSW. I think that we are a sort of forward-looking university. We've always been quite good at innovation. We've always been a welcoming university because when we first started, the university was welcoming and providing opportunities for as many students as possible, and we took international students very early. And I think that culture has rested with us for a long time, and I hope it will continue. So I think that's an advantage of the university. But this education-focused staff thing is an extraordinary advantage that we have. I read, all the news across the sector, and other universities are struggling in their enterprise agreements to be able to appoint academics who are teaching focused. I have a list of academics from other universities that I would like to appoint to this university. And I don't know if prior to this, academics were ever appointed solely on their teaching, but with their education focus, we are now appointing staff. Some have come from inside, but from outside the university as well, solely on the basis of their prowess in teaching. And I think that's a landmark. We have to build it up. I want to thank Louise for really I've known Louise for years as an excellent academic in BABS, but Louise has stepped up to really lead this community and drive it. And I sit there and I'm very impressed by what she puts on the slides and what she doesn't put on the slides. They're simple, clear slides, and it's all about the people. And it really is, it's terrific. So I'm really grateful to you, Louise. All the staff from PVC Easy, who've worked with you. And I also just want to finish by thanking all my friends in the education community. I won't name people to embarrass people, but I feel that I have good friends. And the two things I'm trying to do is make teaching more visible, but I'm also trying to reduce the huge, massive gulf between the management of the university and the people who do the actual work and actually adhere to the values of what the university is all about. Now, how well I succeed in doing that is questionable because there's a lot of constraints, and I've got that swimming pool full of gold coins Richard talks about that we have to keep filling. But I hope that we get to know each other and you get to know each other and that you're more and more influential, because I think it'll be good for the university and good for our students. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for those people online, and I look forward to a great year next year if I don't see some of you beforehand. Thank you.
Everyone, firstly, I want to thank Merlin for the wonderful support he gives to the education community at this university and the way he values it so highly and represents us so well at senior levels at the university. It's an invaluable level of support that we receive from him, and his presence at these events shows that he makes the time in an extremely busy calendar to come and be with us to celebrate and recognise all that we do. Please join me in thanking him. Oh, and he did a pretty good job chairing the debate as well. It's now the time when I sadly have to tell you, it's time to celebrate, relax. It's Friday afternoon. Where teaching is finished for the year, we only have the marking to get through. Thinking about the debate again. Do you now wish you'd had assignments instead of exams? We won't go there. For those of you who are in Gathertown, I hope that you will find a way to celebrate together virtually. And for those of us who struggled in through the weather and the events, please join us outside now for some suitable Friday afternoon refreshments. Thanks everyone, it's been a wonderful week. Take care.